Hello, everybody. It's Chris Schmidt, and we are here today. We've got people on YouTube, we've got people on Twitch. It's an exciting day. Welcome to Season 8, Episode 4 of Rocket Lasso Live Stream Gaming. And in this episode, we're going to be jumping back into our season of Minecraft. If you remember from Episode 3, we were working on this little glade that goes inside of the forest here. But I actually wanted to gather a bunch of supplies up over more near the Lord's Manor area, and that's going to be a lot of the part of the plan today, that we're going to be going back and working on some of the garden areas that we had started kind of a couple episodes ago. So yeah, we've made a lot of progress on that over there. You can see that the tower used to be a little bit more red, and I got rid of that, so it had a little bit more of a Japanese vibe, but now we're working a little bit more medieval the way I wanted it to look. So that's a big change. And your suggestions last time about the changes to this tree, I think, really worked out. So yeah, very happy about the way those things are going. And of course, you know, one of my favorite projects being the stuff down here in the big kind of garden area, I think are looking really great. I'm kind of sitting on it a little bit, seeing if I think it's a little bit too busy, but overall, I am totally digging the vibes. This is totally a place I'd want to hang out with. And we added this little tunnel in there. So yeah, very cool. Very excited to continue on all of this. And of course, why don't we go and fly on over to some of the other stuff that we've been working on recently. So let's go ahead and pop on over here. And some of those new trees we were working on over here on this corner, I think that's really coming out. You see we got our little work zone still set up here. We have all of the crates ready for us transporting the stuff to a new area. And of course, the absolute newest thing we did was the little pond over here. So yeah, I think that's all looking pretty good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso Live. It is Season 8, Episode 4. Hey, everybody. Thanks for hanging out today. It is a busy day, very exciting, lots of stuff going on. Somebody just reminded me that the the Artemis mission 2 is launching today, which is pretty cool. That's in about 3 hours. That's probably right about the time we'd be wrapping up the live stream. And I didn't do much practice for today's tutorial that we're going to try and tackle at the end, but I'll pull up a little bit of a video of the style I might go for on that. Let me pull up the camera here and just cover a couple of things. We'll talk about Slack in a little bit, but I want to cover a couple of different details. If you hadn't seen the recent stuff, I've been posting tutorials. I'm trying to get like a tutorial a week out. And look, Rocket Lasso is live. You should tune in. But 2 weeks ago, we posted this voxelized tree tutorial, which is fun. And then just yesterday, I posted this car tutorial. So we recorded this one on the live stream. Let me mute that and jump through a little bit, where we went and took this mesh of a car and then jumped all the way through and added all this different style to it and made stuff look very sketch and toony inside of Redshift, using mostly our mesh to spline and then the electric spline modifier to add wiggle to it. So that was really cool. And then last week, I tried to tackle a bunch of electrical effects, and that we were having a lot of trouble. Like, we had a bunch of cool stuff, but it needed a little bit more research and whatnot. So I forced myself to get that recorded on Friday. So I just wanted to give you a little preview maybe of a little bit of that stuff. So let me pop that up, and you can see here's the thumbnail I was working on. The actual recorded version is almost 2 hours long, but we end up going through like 7 different electrical rigs where we have these like trails coming behind and little zaps, 2 different ways of creating zaps traveling around the character, outlining the character, these interconnections between some of the different lines, like a whole bunch of different stuff. So that's a brand new tutorial I have recorded, and that should release. Well, I'm going to release it very soon, maybe even later today. Actually, probably not today, probably tomorrow. I'm going to release that on Patreon if you want to get early access to it. And then they'll be public next Tuesday. And today, the rough plan is to jump on over, and we're going to try and do some of these figures in Slicer. I figure kind of a low pressure one where we can pop open Slicer, kind of look at this animation as reference, and just create a bunch of those little kind of hopping animations and stuff. Where this is pretty much me showing off all the different ways I could visualize Slicer affecting just this cheering character. So I think that's what we're going to try and make at the end. But for now, we're going to need questions from everybody. Where what type of stuff do we want to make in Cinema 4D today? I gotta figure out my schedule because in just over 2 weeks I'm gonna be going to NAB. I'm gonna be going to NAB, and I've got a bunch of presentations. If anybody's going to be at NAB, it should be good. We got a bunch of speakers going there. Andy Needham and EJ are going to be there, and some new speakers that I haven't met before, so it's going to be cool. I'm giving 4 different presentations at the Maxon booth, and I'm also giving a bigger production presentation. So I got 5 different unique presentations I need to prepare. So that might affect the live streaming schedule, and definitely potentially the tutorial schedule, because that requires a lot of extra editing. But I do want to keep that going to the best of my ability. So that's the plan. But yeah, we'll do some slices here. So if anybody has any thoughts, and if you haven't caught them before, I've been trying to record a tutorial at the end of these live streams. And so if you have any thoughts of like styles or things to add to this one to make it different, or different inspirations, this one is just something I made up. So that will be something to tackle there. But for now, we need to tackle some questions from the audience. And let me scroll around. Somebody says they second something. Oh, it's maybe Eric has one. And Indeed popped in with a question. Excellent, thank you. But it looks like maybe somebody on YouTube had a question right away. How this is from Boggs. How would you simulate a subtle barbecue smoke coming from the bottom and from... Sorry, I'm having a little trouble parsing your sentence. But yeah, like subtle barbecue smoke coming from the bottom, something intro text. Maybe you can slightly reword the question, because it sounds like some of those specifics matter, and you had your question in first, so I'd like to tackle that. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing smoke, that's definitely going to be a pyro question. The form... Oh, I'm going to assume subtle barbecue smoke coming from the bottom to form into text. I'm assuming that's what you mean. So let's go ahead and tinker with some of that. So let's jump on over into Cinema 4D. Let me save my thumbnail scene file there, and let's just continue from scratch. Now, there's a couple... Let's go ahead and make sure we're on the correct screen as well. So there's a couple of things that can be tricky decisions to make when you are doing pyro stuff, because a lot of the pyro is designed to look good at sort of a larger scale. And if you get really small and close up, things can get messed up as far as scale. And there's unfortunately not like a universal scale button that you're just like, hey, all the important parameters shrink down. So you end up needing to change, from my recollection, like a dozen different parameters to make things look proper tiny. I remember I made a rig where there's like fire in a pan, and there's a real world size pan that's supposed to be like a grease fire. And I had to change a bunch of settings to make it look that small. It wasn't just like one little setting. So keep in mind those types of limitations. So if we want to keep it a little bit more controllable and not have to worry too much about dealing with that scale stuff, we'll probably just work more at the scale of, say, a cube. Now, the tricky bit here might be that you're saying barbecue smoke. And I got to tell you, I don't exactly know what barbecue smoke might specifically be. Barbecue smoke. Let's just search YouTube. And yeah, so it's, if this is what you're talking about, you just kind of have like this like light wispiness going. That's what I think of with barbecue smoke. So that's very faint. And that faintness, I think, could make it hard to make it actually look like it's forming text. So let's just keep that in mind as we go. I'll probably end up making it look quite a bit thicker. But let's go ahead and pull in a cube. I'll make it editable. And let's just... Well, I keep on thinking we're making a barbecue lid, but you just wanted barbecue smoke. So you want text to form from it. So let's see, I haven't done some of this in a little while, so let's see how we can do here. Let's just start with text. I'll type in RKT just to be some text. We'll make it nice and beefy with my favorite lemon milk bold. And we'll make that deeper. We'll give it a little extra space between the letters. And they're probably a reasonable scale for what we're doing. Now, text objects, sometimes the text object is fine as a text object. Sometimes the text object needs to be put into a connect object. I'm just going to jump it into a connect object right away. And we probably don't need to weld. And immediately we could throw some pyro on here. So why don't we? I'll just right click and add on a, let's see, a simulation pyro emitter. Yep, that's the one we're looking for. So out of the gate, what do we want to do? Well, right now it's emitting from the surface. If that's what we want, then that should work fine. But we also have the volume. Now, if I recall, they also made the sparse surface and sparse volume. And I had trouble telling, this is supposed to calculate faster, and it looked almost identical to me. So generally speaking, I'm always going to use the sparse version of things unless I have a reason not to. So because we're saying volume, the hope here would be that it's going to fill up that entire area with smoke, or fire in this case. If I hit play, it's going to take a second to initialize, but especially on this machine, it should run quite well. So you see, we got a really nice burst right away, looking pretty good. So yep, that's looking cool. Let's give ourselves a few more frames. I don't think it needs to be crazy long. Now, obviously, this is immediately giving us a whole bunch of fire, and that fire is turning into smoke, but it doesn't have to go immediately to fire. So, and if you want to add clarifications to the questions, yeah, but definitely, yeah. I don't even have X particles anymore. I haven't had them in a while. But let's go ahead and we've got our density going here, so that's cool. I want to turn off any fire, so we can go down to temperature and say, hey, don't create temperature. So now this is only creating smoke for us. So generally speaking, that's going to go a pretty long way. From here, I think a lot of it turns into the thickness, the density that we're actually throwing out there. And I know this just says straight up density, but that actually is going to be a major part of this. It's constantly adding more and more smoke as it goes. And that smoke is going to be fading away very quickly. You see, as soon as I lowered the density, suddenly that smoke doesn't go up anywhere near as far. And that's because the smoke essentially evaporates away very quickly because there's not that much of it. But you see, even now that the smoke is very, very dense, like this is completely black. We can't see through it at all. It has to fade away before we see any of it. A couple things I'll tweak immediately. Let's go to our pyro scene and immediately start playing with, go to pyro. We've got our voxel size. I think due to the scale of things that we're doing, I'll lower that down to 2.5. So let's see if that can handle it. And yeah, so we have a lot more smoke, but that's going to make things, or a lot smaller voxels. So more voxels will go slower, but I think we should be able to handle that. And while we're here in the pyro output, pyro scene, pyro tab, we can now change like the global settings that are involved here. So because we don't want the smoke, I want to make the smoke very faint, but I don't want to fade away too quickly. So we got to go find the density tab. And under here, we're going to find our two dissipations, relative and absolute density dissipation. So right now it's dissipating 7% per frame, I think. So we'll drop it down to 1, so it should take 7 times as long to dissipate, although we probably are going to lower that even more. But now we've got 1/10 the smoke. We see it lives long enough to travel up and make these cool plumes. So now we can start lowering our density again. So let's move to our pyro again. And back up to density. I don't know why that expanded. So let's drop it to 0.1 in this case, and let's see how much smoke that gives us. So now you see less smoke is being generated, so it's starting to fade out. But even that's still a lot. So 0.02, there's a lot smaller than 10. So you can see I can actually get a little bit of that going. Now it's constantly generating that much, and it seems to be fading out pretty quick. So let's go back to our pyro output, and just for now, I'm going to collapse a bunch of those. Let's just say pretty much 0. So that's doing 0, and we have this absolute density dissipation. But of course, this is dissipating at 0.01, but given our size, that's actually quite a bit. So I'm going to get rid of that. All right, we're lowering that to 0.01. So there's an absolute value that's constantly draining down. Now, if we want that to be drifting upward, we are probably going to need to give it a little extra buoyancy, because without that density, there's not a lot pulling it up. Or we could just not worry about playing with that density too much and start creating things or driving things with the forces. So creating a wind here, we can aim that upward, and immediately that should start adding some wind into the scene. So you see everything starts getting pushed upward. And that should propagate through all the other systems. So that should give us like some displacement and whatnot. Visually hide that wind, because that's sort of annoying to see. And let's see. I think that we have there's a cloud of noise that's generating here. And I'm sorry, it's generating from a cloud of noise. So if we go back into our tag here, you'll see at the bottom, there is a tab called noise. And inside, you see we are indeed using noise. So certain parts are getting filled in. You'll see if we just look at the first few frames that as this goes, you see how certain areas are less dense than others. If we just turn off the noise and we do that again, you're going to see that the whole thing is going to fill up like very uniformly. So depending on what you're going for, that might actually be a good idea. Now, we're going to be constantly going to be jumping between the tag and the output here. But I want to get rid of a lot of kind of the randomness that we're seeing here. I want to see more uniformity. And you see, we get all these tiny little, there's a lot of tiny turbulences kind of going on. So under extra forces, I believe, there's our buoyancy. Vorticity could be a major part. But for now, let's go under turbulence. And I'll say 50 turbulence. I'll say 0 turbulence. Let's see what that does. So we still have a wind blowing upward. I got rid of turbulence. And now you see those are breaking apart a lot less. There's also, we do have this vorticity, but I think we want vorticity. But for now, let's try dropping that down to 0 and just see what happens. Because I think we want that organicness. But I think you'll see, now that we got rid of vorticity and we got rid of the turbulence, you see that's pretty much traveling super smooth. Actually, I don't mind that. It's a little bit more mushroom cloudy, but it's in such a way that I think we can control it. So once you have something, right now I'm just trying to design the smoke to behave the way I want, and it will work on getting the reveal going the way we want a little bit further in. So from here, I'd probably start doing things like adding in some lovely turbulences that we can use to control the shaping of it. So we need to give it some sort of scale. Honestly, 100% at the scale we're at here, sort of 100%, if you look at a figure, is kind of like that. It's a good scale for some things are about the size. So immediately you can see a little bit of kind of displacement going on. So let's lower our wind strength, which isn't too strong, but I want to do that and then increase our turbulence strength a little bit. In general, it's going to push up, but now the stronger turbulence means it can probably even push down a little bit. And now you see we get this really fun sort of drifting apart of things. So this is more of the organic-y looking smoke that I wanted to make. Of course, C4D is set up so that the initial looking smoke is trying to look as realistic as it can. So there's a lot of settings in there that are sort of excessive that we don't need. Moving into episode 4, I will give this scene file a save just in case. 1A, and we'll call that BBQ smoke. Let's see. Yeah. And okay, so we get that's sort of this large turbulence going, and I do like having these larger ones, but you know me, I like to create a second one. Let's rename this one to small. See how well we can get this to work. I'm going to make that be perhaps 20% of the original size. And we can look at that in isolation, and now you can see I've got this tinier cloud that can create these smaller drifts. And now a combination of those two things hopefully are going to give us something very art directable. We can get those tiny little ones, but we also feel these larger movements happening. So, at this point, everything gets really controllable. I could say, okay, this strength should be lowered down to like half the amount, about 7. So those can get a little bit of imperfections on there, but generally speaking, it's these bigger movements that are going to look the way we want. And let's say, well, in theory, I know that we want to eventually have this grow on, like kind of reveal the smoke upward. Let's say that you wanted it to disappear, like just to explore this design space. So eventually those will fade away. But right now we are constantly emitting more smoke. So instead of constantly emitting more smoke under density, let's say that we are not constantly adding. Instead, we will do actually set amount. Now that I think about it, does set constantly set or is... Yeah. Okay. So this is that is constantly adding it in. So we can do either of these that if we want. I'm going to hit undo. We got our density add again. This is exactly the, well, I guess we can just keyframe. You know me, I always avoid keyframes where I can. But let's say that that's going to give us sort of actually, I'm trying to think of, I like that number, but let's get rid of it. And we'll do a density add. So I'll say let's say we even just do like 1 frame of it. I don't know if it can even handle doing 1 frame. But we'll drop that back down to 0. And right now it's probably too much. But if I play, 1 frame is too short because it's probably generating on frame 1 and not 0. So just grab both of these and scoot them a single frame in. I think that Should work now. Yeah, now we get a single frame, and now you see that there's nothing left over. It's not generating more and more, and we can just get this burst where they drift up, which looks pretty cool. And as you know, actually, given the controls we just made, like that's pretty cool that we can make this. We have them burst, drift upward, and if we give this a little bit of them fading out, go down to our density and then reset this dissipation. I go to 7, it'll probably be way too quick. Yeah, you see that's going to very quickly fade away. But let's set that down to like 2, and then we can get this burst going, and then you kind of get this cloud that comes out of nowhere. And now think of that in reverse. Like I can't actually play it in reverse without caching the whole thing. But imagine that we had nothing, and then this wisp appears, and then they drift down and then form that text. So always sort of imagine things, if you can, in reverse, because that's another cool way of going about making things. But yeah, I think we got like the basics of what we'd like this to be. And I'm trying to make it in such a way that it's pretty art directable. But now let's go a little bit more towards the brief and talk about if we were revealing it as if it was going upward. Now, we didn't get a ton of instruction, and I'm looking at it where it goes to, is it just supposed to appear kind of out of nowhere, or is it supposed to like drift up from like a spot below and it sort of reveals it up on the top? Like all of those would be slightly different rigs. For now, as far as I understand it, the brief is just to essentially do what we're doing here, probably have it fade out relatively quickly. And let me bring back our density add. We'll be constantly adding it in, but it's going to fade away. So right now, these are going to be drifting. But in a way, actually, we want these to now go away quickly. Now the brief is that, let's scroll down. It sucks that we always have to jump between these two parameters. But now I'm going to jump this back to 7. We might need to change a bunch of numbers. But now you can see we've got our text. And yeah, actually, I like it's fading out very quickly. But I do like that it's not getting too dark. But I want it to live a little bit longer than it is. But we also want the original text to be pretty prominent. So I like it drifting away. We might even make a second emitter here, so we have one that's really distinct and then one that can live for a little while and drift away, because that smoke drifting away is pretty cool. Also, I'm not sure if we'll be able to, but you see that this is so faint that it's drifting off, and it kind of crops off pretty quickly, where you'd kind of hope that we could see more. I want to see if I could do that by dropping down here, and you see we got this draw quality, which we could potentially increase. I don't know how much it'll change what we're seeing here. But the other thing is, where's that setting? Density multiplier. I thought there was or maybe it's up in the density. Oh yeah, density active cutoff threshold and density cutoff. And these are numbers that are pretty much like once the density is less than that, like just have it cease to exist. I don't know if that will help us, but actually, and they're already at the smallest possible number in C4D. Sometimes typing that in, even though it went to 0, they could still technically be there. But that's what is actually making them terminate at a certain point. But I think that might just be a threshold that's not allowed to exist beyond that. So I guess we'll just have to deal with that. So yeah, it mostly turns into an exercise of how quickly do we want that to be solid there. But overall, I like the way these wisps are looking. We could push it further. We could add vorticity back in and whatnot. In fact, just for fun, why don't we add the vorticity back to some level? Hard to find the setting sometime. Extra forces, vorticity. So if I put that back to 5, yeah, you can see it's immediately very fuzzy, and I don't like that fuzziness. Now there is a source for it and whatnot. We'll drop the vorticity down to 1, and yeah, so I guess it is there, but it's just wispier now. But yeah, actually, I kind of like that. That's a little bit of extra. But yeah, essentially, you could also, it seems like we could think of this vorticity as this small turbulence that we're using. So now I'm just trying to think of how I want to go about revealing parts of this. We've got options. I wonder, I mean, you could do stuff with vertex maps and whatnot, but we're doing a volume here. So we could animate the volume. That is a method that would be relatively straightforward, honestly. The first thing I'll try, though, is let's just create a destruction. So this destruction, I'm pretty sure just deletes out Pyro. And yes, you see this one is just deleting out anything in the box. So it's almost like it never existed. So here's the absolute simplest way to make it reveal. We'll just make our box pretty big here. And you can start out from below. And I guess it's all dying pretty quickly. But if I were to just start dragging this up, you see as I drag it, it just reveals from the bottom. So that actually gives you a pretty good option. I'd have to move it up. I guess the downside to this is as I move it, these little bits, you see if I hold it here, the smoke is going to die as it drifts up into that area. And right now we do want it drifting up. So that sort of prevents it. So depending on how quickly you drag that up, it's going to kind of work for you or not. The next method that immediately popped in my head, and this might be nice for making these look a little bit more cloudy out of the gate, is turning this into a slightly more complex piece of geometry. Let's throw that into a volume builder, volume mesher, and we're going to get this blobby text, and we can make it as blobby or not blobby as we want. I personally kind of like it being this lower. Well, the lower it is, the quicker it's going to be. But rounding out, this is kind of a cheap way of rounding it, and the text is what's the right way? The volume is imperfect anyway. Or I mean, it's going to look sort of like this cloud as it is. So having it rounded, I think, is going to soften it instead of it being those really sharp letters. Getting it rounded, I think, can look nice. I also wonder, there's substeps, emission fall off. I wonder how well this will work. Like, can we fade in from the edges? And I'm not sure if this is, it just says 4, and that might be 4 voxels. It might be 4 units. So I'm going to keep on increasing that. And I just want to see if that makes it look like that the edges are coming in a little bit less. I want the edges to be softer, but right now that looks pretty sharp, and it's hard to tell. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is pay attention to this corner right here. When it first begins, before anything moves, you see we have this very distinct shape. I'm trying to see if I give that a bunch of emission fall off. Is that softer? And yeah, I do not see a visual difference there. So maybe that's not what that's doing. Out of curiosity, I'm also going to set this to just a plain old volume and just see if that gives us anything different. Let that initialize. I mean, I'm not really feeling too much of a speed difference. Let's give that an emission fall off. Okay, that's why I kind of suspected that might be a little bit different. That, now that we're on regular volume and we gave it some emission fall off, I definitely feel like that's softer now. So that could give you a softer text to fade in, so it's not quite so distinct there. But of course, you see it's still falling off on the edge. Also keep in mind now that we have this big fall off, and maybe we can lower that. Yeah, actually, you felt it immediately. Look, see, here's this big fall off where it's very soft. And as soon as I drop it down, suddenly it filled out more because that fall off isn't happening. So you can use this as a way to soften those edges a little bit. But if you soften it too much, it's actually creating less smoke because they're not being created near those edges. So, you know, again, it's a tool in the toolbox. So we've got this lovely smoke being generated. I don't know if it's like as distinct as you'd want it to be. But, you know, at any given point, we can grab the text and we'd be like, oh, the overall text is going to be like way bigger. So rewind, hit play. Now we have bigger text, but all the smoke simulation is still that smaller size. So everything's just going to act a little bit more like it's more detailed. Actually, it's denser now just because there's more of a cloud. Overall, you know, we're probably dropping a few frames. Wouldn't be a bad idea for me to pull up my frames per second. Yeah, we're down to a slower frame rate, so it's not as accurate. But you see how by making it bigger, it's as if the text is now more distinct. Right? So hit undo. Hard to tell. Yeah, hit undo. Now that's down smaller. Now, potentially we could just counteract that as well just by making a smaller voxel size. Let's try making a voxel size of 1.5. So not quite half, but is that, yeah, it's pretty distinct. And do we get like nicer fall offs? I mean, yeah, I think it's looking nicer and it's not too dense either. So again, those are the tools you can, like the levers you can kind of push and pull for how distinct you want your text to be. And then honestly, at a certain point, having the stuff revealed and then actually showing the text inside of it would be, you know, kind of a fun way of like crossfading in and whatnot. So anyway, we still need to get that text to fade in, but I'm thinking we've got this nice, clean, super simple volume rig. So why don't we just create some sort of intersection from here? And what's kind of cool is you, in theory, could shape this somehow. So let's say I make a cylinder. We'll put that at an angle. Grab my radius and make that radius pretty big. I don't need any height, but let's give it a couple more segments around. Scoot this off to the side. And essentially, I just want this to pass through, but I want it to show up only where those two things are intersecting. So dropping this inside of the volume builder, you're gonna see that turns into a giant volume. But now let's say I want where these two intersect. And now only where those two things exist is there anything. So let's grab this and keyframe. So I will begin down here. Keyframe. And I don't know how long we want it to take to reveal. Let's give it 3 seconds. I'll just pull it in just enough to see everything. And keyframe. Everything's already still on that volume measure, so nothing, I think that covers everything that it needs to do. So let's just take a look at that by itself, where this is what the volume builder itself is doing. Now that volume builder is going to take some calculation time because it's rebuilding every single frame. And then I think that there's also going to be extra calculation time because the Pyro has a mesh. And it's like, oh, I've got the mesh. I've degraded it into voxels. But that's like, oh, the voxel mesh is refreshing. So the voxel cloud is also having, what it's generating from also needs to recalculate every single frame. But now, if we take a peek at that, we can now see that this is getting revealed however we want it to, that those are kind of pulling in from the side, and it's all still the same smoke. I mean, our frame it's lesser frames, but we should probably start sending this out to the picture viewer, which I think they always look a little bit different, which is strange. But let's set that to be a viewport renderer and MP4. And we don't need the save. Turn that off. Output, all frames, viewport renderer. Copy effects from viewport, filter, load preset. I'm just going to load the crisp preset, so there's no like ground grid and all that stuff. And we don't need the HUD. So let's see if that, and then we've got this outline box, which is handy, but I don't want that showing up either. So we'll go into Pyro, and I think at the bottom, draw a bounding box. Well, I'll turn that off. Okay, it's cool. Now I do think that these look different in this renderer, but I want to see, we want to see what it looks like kind of in real time. So let's give that a save and send that out to render. Ooh, I had they're getting erased out quickly, but here is the running electric guy. Whee! Now it's all choppy because it's not in RAM anymore, but that's also one of the tricky bits when it comes to, it's got this red box on it now. Yeah, and even you see the Pyro looks different. That's always happened to me, that it looks very different in the viewport renderer than it does in the viewport. It's a little, throws me off. Yeah, look at this distinct outline. Yeah, it's bugging me a little bit. Let's see if we can just turn it into like the real final and render that, because while we are seeing this quickly, that just doesn't look the same. I don't understand why they're different. If anybody has an explanation for why that looks different in the viewport to now, and I mean, I know I'm not crazy. You can see this let's let them drift. You see we've got this fade out, but then look at this very distinct outline, and that's just not happening in the viewport. Scott, I have been saving. I've been saving almost constantly, but I appreciate the reminders. So I always have trouble remembering exact settings to get this to render. So bear with me. We are going to make hang on. We're in the viewport render. Let's go back to Redshift. I was like, why are my materials not here? We go to materials. There is a Pyro volume. I believe that's what we want. I can drop that onto, I believe it's the Pyro output that we want that to be on. And we're going to need to give it some sort of illumination. And that means we go into HDRs, interior, and I got to stop double clicking it. I don't know why that's like stuck in my brain. Yes, thank you. Drag it, don't click it. And we'll tell that to not show up in the camera. Thank you very much. And what else? We haven't messed with the material, but I want to see if something is showing up. So let's send that out. Oh, okay. I was like, why is it showing that? Oh, because it was already open. So we'd have to give that a frame or two. It's going to have to initialize, but let's see how quick that goes. Although I just remembered our Redshift Advanced threshold probably doesn't need to be that high. I'll do like 0.5. Let me know if everything gets choppy, because right now this definitely is like I could feel it chug as it was like trying to prep that. So I don't want it to get too funky on our live stream. Okay, let me think. That material by default, if I put it in the right place, it already has it's already fed in like the Pyro name, so it already has density in there. So I will just go into this and turn off that, and I want to see my text. Yeah, my text is now always there, which is good. So now it should be generating it, and how quickly? I mean, yeah, really, within like 10 frames, we should see something if this is working properly. Who knows if it is? Now it does have very low density, and maybe that just won't render. It doesn't say it. Well, right now it's saying it has not dropped any frames, which is good. It looks like we did answer the question to the satisfaction of Boggs. So we will. We can continue, but yeah, at least we seem to have satisfied that. Now, this is still not showing up. I wonder if it's just a question of density. When it comes to this type of thing, I just want to make sure that it's not something obvious. So what I'm going to do is go into our Pyro, and let's just give it like a bunch. I'm going to give it a density of 5. So that's going to make a bunch of smoke, and let's see if that shows up. And it's possible. Oh, no, it is there. So this is a question of density because immediately that is showing up. It's interesting that it's currently so faint that it just doesn't even show up in the render. So that's interesting. Within this material, there is the scatter coefficient. Maybe that's what we want. Maybe we just need to increase the density. But that would be a little bit annoying if we had to. Let me think. That's the tint scatter coefficient. I mean, that has to be the number. I'm going to try lowering it by 100, and then we'll try raising it by a factor of 100 just to see if that shows us. I'd like to do it via the material and not like actually change the density, because I would love for our viewport and our renderer to be, somewhat compatible. Okay, so I think we'd see something very quickly if that was working. So that's fine. Now let's go the opposite direction. Before it said 1, now we'll do 100. So now it's 100 times, potentially 100 times the density. I don't know if we want that to go up or down. So this is the type of test I do. Yeah, ooh, okay, we do see a hint of something after 1 frame. So yeah, pushing that up is now going to make it stand out a little bit. The something else I'll point out is that these are fading in very well. It is the blob shape, and before they start drifting at all, well, they haven't drifted at all. What's the right way of saying this? Well, I guess maybe it'll be fine when the shape is animating in, but like right now, it's enough time for them to exist, but not enough time for them to start getting blown around. So some of it goes to, I'm trying to think, like we need time for it to fade in, so we could have it take longer for them to fade in. I just don't want it like to look so perfect as they're immediately created, so that just might require time. And yeah, even right now it's not. Yeah, we're gonna need a decent number of frames before that moves into the wispy territory. Now, I think times 10 is probably going to be enough there because that got really dense really quickly. In our viewport, let's see how long it takes until. Yeah, actually, it's not until like frame 60 or something that we start feeling a little bit of that drifting. So that makes me want to go back and at this point, hopefully, what I want you to take away is the sort of push and pull that we can add in here. That it's like, oh, like here are the important settings. So I'm going to more than double the density that we're adding, but I'm going to add more than double it because we're going to re-enable our noise. And let me see how. Let me see how quickly. Yeah, you can. This is dense enough that you can see, you can kind of feel that noise. So what I'd like to do is probably make a fairly high contrast noise with some sort of pattern that makes it pretty messy. like just a few frames of Luca. Yeah, you see that's pretty messy. That should mess up the edges quite a bit. The overall scale, I'm going to go 777, almost triple what we had. Yeah, so a little bit bigger. You see these kind of imperfections around there. That's really going to hide the overall shape. And keep in mind, we also have those edges, a very nice parameter to play with. Let's double the softness of those edges. And yeah, you see those are now softer on those edges. So I really like that. So now that I sort of see the noise pattern, I want to give that some animation speed. And right now the animation speed is set to 0. If we set that to 1, I think that's going to be pretty slow. Well, I'm trying to decide, do we want a slow thing where it's kind of drifting around, slowly revealing? Or do we want it to be so freaking fast? Yeah, you see right there. Actually, that's not bad. I thought we'd have to make it really fast. But yeah, that added in kind of imperfections right away. That could make it look a lot better. But I just wanted to show you the alternative where, I feel like we can see the density sort of moving around where it's getting created. But if we were to make this speed 10 or 100 times faster, then those first couple of frames, you can see it's here, but the next frame, it's generating smoke for a completely different spot. The next frame, it's a completely different spot. Next frame, a completely different spot. So you end up with like something that's randomizing so quickly that there's not any sort of implied like drifting around. Instead, it's just like kind of chaos in there. But I will say I am feeling jitter in there. So maybe going that fast in this instance, in this rig, isn't working. But we could probably go faster than what we have. So that's 2. But even here, I kind of feel that rippling through it. So yeah, I don't know. Sort of a artistic choice you can make. But that's why I made it more dense, because like it's only creating, in theory, like 50% of where it used to be. So we had to increase the density to see it at all. But still, it takes a while before some of the wind kicks in. There's always opportunities to, like, I don't know, it turns into art directing, but if we make the wind faster, then more quickly, these are going to start trying to drift upward. Even that, I'm kind of surprised at how long it takes for them to get going. Is there an initial velocity? I know there is velocity settings, but yeah, velocity set to movement. But I'm going to say absolute velocity. Yeah, okay, this is what I wanted. Here's a direction that's upward, and it's a strength of 1. I imagine that's kind of crazy high, or a strength of 100. Hitting play. Actually, that's not bad. I thought that'd be too strong. But giving it this initial velocity means it's like flinging out it like right away. Let's lower that down to 10-ish and see. Yeah, actually, that 100 is pretty good. Essentially, I just don't want it taking all that initial time to go. To give you a direct parallel, think of like when you make something gravity. If you make gravity and the object's just there, the particle gets born, and then gravity's like, oh, I want the gravity to start pulling it down. It's going to just kind of hang there for a second before gravity starts accelerating it away. But if you make the emitter say, well, spit it out as fast as gravity is going to make it continue going down, then you get the initial movement. So getting a little bit of this initial burst going upward is making it so we don't have to wait nearly as long. Now, once there is some movement going in there, I bet you that I could drop the strength down right in the middle of the animation, and everything is still going to kind of continue going upward, which is pretty interesting. So I might just keyframe that to just be during the first couple of frames. Let me see. Well, here's the thing: is this is all based on velocities. So there's like this big velocity field being generated, and as the stuff pulls up, it wants to pull everything else up. So I bet you that if I'm just gonna hit play for like those couple of frames, keyframe that, and then just go until frame 10 and drop that down to 0. We've now given it that initial burst, and just that little burst there, I think is going to be enough to maintain this looking like it's constantly drifting around without like really flinging them. You see it calms down a bit, but then we've already got them dispersed. So maybe we can weaken those a little bit. I can just grab the keyframe. That was a lot in the start. Maybe I'll just spread them apart from each other, so it's going to fade more quickly. And if that's still too much, no, see, that's almost exactly what I wanted. Like very quickly, we've got, they look like they're alive. So pretty much that's all I wanted it to be. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. Let's reactivate our cylinder. See how that looks when that's kind of making it push in. Heavy scene detected. Oh, that makes sense. Thanks for the warning. inside the volume builder. Yeah, that's not turned on, so they weren't intersecting. So it was actually filling the whole volume of that giant cylinder. So now, oh, well, yeah, I guess something to keep in mind is I had to fade out, but now these are slowly getting born, so they don't have that initial movement going. So yeah, a little tricky. I guess I can grab that later keyframe, and instead of it going down to 0, I can have it at like 33. So big burst initially, but even that initial burst isn't going to help too much because it doesn't even exist yet. But then it's going to have 33 always, so they're still getting a little bit of a kick to go upward. So yeah, that can be revealed however we like. Yeah, you see how much quicker it went as soon as the cylinder wasn't being keyframed. Interesting. And then I wonder, I guess it would have to be almost a separate rig because the density fading out is controlled universally through that pyro output. It actually makes it pretty tricky. What I'm thinking is it would be kind of fun to make a second bit of smoky text, and that second bit of smoky text could fade out really quickly, but always be hanging out in the beginning. So you kind of have more distinct letters, even though they look smoky on the outside. But they're controlled universally by their pyro output. So I think we'd have to make like an entirely separate simulation scene to make them have different behaviors like that, which is a bit of a shame. Yeah, we just can't control them separately. Like within the pyro tag, all we can do is say how much density did we make, not how quickly is it going to fade away on any level. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Yeah, more distinct layers, smaller voxels will make it more detailed. But I think that's about as far as I'm going to go. So I guess I'll tell that to go out to the renderer. We'll let that chug for a little bit. We'll see if we get something nice from it. If it shows up at all. The last one we tested was at 10 times the density. But yeah, let me go and start investigating the next questions. And yeah, it's always fun to tackle some pyro, especially in this new computer when it will play back fast enough that we can do it during a live stream. So yeah, let's give that a few more frames because we should actually, no, it's fading in from the corner, so we'll give it a little bit of extra time. Eric was trying to be on theme with the Artemis launch about getting a smoke cloud from a rocket launching. It's actually something that's really interesting because I do watch a lot of space news and whatnot. And so I have seen a lot of people making simulations of even, say, the Artemis rocket taking off. And it just goes to pyro and smoke simulations in general get out of control so quickly that it gets really hard to make large pyro simulations that feel as detailed as you want. This is still like we're 20 frames in. I'm barely seeing any hint in the corner. Meanwhile, here, if we let that go, I guess it's actually barely in at 20 as well. Let me give it a few more frames. But yeah, I think it needs to be a little bit denser than we're currently getting it. Yeah, maybe about double it is my guess. Although, well, it's kind of tricky because like right there, that feels really thick, but all the other stuff feels less thick. Maybe we could remap it. I'm not sure if remapping, like how I'd want to remap this, potentially doing that type of thing, but I'm not sure. We'll give that a few more frames just to see. But yeah, it's already going across. I feel like it would be a little denser overall. Curious. But yeah, well, this is a kind of a reminder that you can make it look good in the viewport, but that doesn't mean it's going to look the exact same way when you tell it to render. And a lot of this is going to be dependent on lighting and yeah, apparently this density could be trickier than I thought as well. And then there's this tint. We could probably tint it to be a particular color here. So maybe we could even be like, okay, it's got some density, but it shouldn't go to bright white. It should try and go to like a smokier gray. Like, I'm not even sure that is the case. Actually, I'd be kind of inclined to, I don't want to stop the render, but render again with some color and just see if that indeed is tinting it, because gray would be giving us less information. So yeah, Eric, a smoke cloud from our rocket launching. There's so much chaotic forces going on inside of our rocket launching. Um, the I'm not against us trying to tackle it, but I have to imagine that we're going to run into some stylistic limitations. We have to start being a little bit more, let's say, generous with the interpretations. Let's give that a save. Okay, I'll hit undo. Give that a save and then maybe redo. But yeah, let's continue with our pyro explorations. And I mean, again, this is going to go back to if we're going to scale, like how do we want to scale things? You would think that you want to scale up super huge where it's like, oh, okay, if this is a figure and then we want to make a rocket of like whatever scale, that's going to have to be like, massive. And then the pyro cloud is going to be like, we're talking, if that's the rocket, then the pyro cloud's like this big, like the volume of that stuff is super crazy, but it goes to like all those nice vortexes and swirls and all that. Like we need a lot of voxels to do it. So anyway, I'm just saying it's not this is a significantly non-trivial problem. But in any case, we can tinker a little bit, see how it goes. If it starts kind of dead ending a little bit, like I will stop early to try and grab a different question. Rocket launch smoke. So, I mean, this one is fire and smoke, and also the way, and even this makes me worried because you get flame trenches. So we could generate some geometry to be a flame trench. It'd be funny if we made it from a backdrop, but how do I want to make this geometry? Actually, this you call it a cissoid? Like it's not a shape that we have ever used, maybe. But if we were to make that and flip it around, and I will make a connect object. And actually, I guess we'll just make that editable so we can close it. And then that's a pretty good kind of flame trench shape. It's already made of a lot of points. So I might grab a couple of those ones on the end, scale them out, grow selections, scale them out. I'm just kind of letting that stretch out a little bit on the end. I'll call that good enough. So yeah, that's kind of a base little trenchy thing. That can be fed into a extrude. And the extrude, never trust an extrude set to auto. So we'll set that to Z. Give that a bunch of length. 5,000 perhaps. Yeah, that'll be good. That gets centered, and we'll do that with an axis. So geometry axis, drop that as the second object, and I'll say, yeah, now it's sitting on the ground and it's centered. So you can see that kind of put us nice and dead center. And that gets pulled down. Zoom up. Yeah, that's fine. It looks a little bit weird when we zoom out. You see like the little twitchy thing here, but that's just two polygons that are very close to intersecting, but not quite. If you look at our polygon count, that's quite reasonable. So, with any luck, that will work. And that would get flung down. It's going to strike, and it's going to be pushed in two directions. Honestly, I'm trying to think if the ramps tilt upward at all. I think they actually kind of do, which I didn't just represent here. And then we also need some walls here. So let's make, I don't know how far we want to go. And, I'm just eyeballing a lot of this, so. We didn't even pull up any reference, which we probably should, but let's just keep going. We've come this far. The trenches tend to get wider and whatnot as they go, but for now, we're just going to keep it light. I suppose I'll just make a duplicate of that. Actually, we'll make an instance of it just in case we add subdivisions or something. And that can be given a negative. Boop. Okay, now we got both of those. Okay, so let's call that the flame trench. And now we need a bunch of pyro blasting downward, and we need to see if it's going to try and, well, here's where it's tricky. It is, it's going to be flinging out, all of the energy, essentially the energy of a gigantic bomb. It's flinging it down with the force of a bomb in a particular direction. And so it's at its very most fastest at the very beginning. And we need that to have a ton of force. And then that force is flinging everything else. But very quickly, it's going to run into air resistance and then sort of churn on top of itself and then start drifting upward. So that's sort of what we are contending with here. So, all we can do is tinker. So we add pyro tags to objects. We'll make a cylinder. I'm sorry, a disc shape. And that's up on Y. So we will say aim the normals down on Y minus. And right now it's a little bit bigger than the rocket, but we'll just do that for visual purposes. Right click and pyro emitter. Keep in mind we're in a new scene. This is generating from the surface. I will say another sparse surface if we don't need better. And it is going to have fire and everything. Actually, it's probably going to have fuel. Well, it shouldn't actually. I was going to say it could have fuel. And now we get that going. You can already see we're at a relatively large scale. It looks cool. It looks cool at this scale, but man, we're going to get so much bigger than that, and I don't know if it can handle it. Okay, so all of the properties it has out of the gate, because we're going for more of a realistic fire, are probably pretty good. So a lot of this turns into we need to be like dramatically increasing the volumes and whatnot. And like I said, if you have a optimized rocket, it should not be burning fuel outside of the cylinder. That's all just lost potential. That's you wasting weight, the tyranny of the rocket equation. So if you're not burning your fuel inside of the rocket, then you're just throwing it out the back and it does nothing. If burning over here does not push the rocket up, it has to burn inside and push down. So we are probably going to have to, well, I know for a fact we'll have to dramatically increase those. But for now, we've got a velocity, and we're going to set this to a absolute velocity -1, and immediately let's set that to a -1,000, which is not going to be anywhere near enough, but let's see what that does. Oh, and we need to make some colliders. So right click on all those and simulation collider. I don't think any of that matters. No, I think it's all fine. So save and hit play. So now you see that it is blasting down, but all of our forces want to push up. We gave it all that force pushing down, and it barely moved at all. And also, I mean, not super great, but look at this. We were pushing down so much and so fast that it's like doing all this separating. Let's give it a few more frames. I'm just curious what it does. Actually, I'm quite thrown off by what it's doing there. What is that doing? The disk is not a collider. That's most curious. Turn off velocity. That wants to push up. It's all nice and cloudy. Okay. And now if we save, turn on some velocity and push up and set it to a regular amount. Let's see what it does. So immediately starts pushing everything up. A little less smoky. Actually, okay, even when we push up, it's immediately pretty different. So before we start flinging it down, let's throw a lot more temperature in there. We're going to add 10 times the temperature. Okay, so a lot more, 10 times the amount. And the density is a density add, so we'll just make that also 10 times the amount. So we do that. Okay, we just, are we going to have to just keep making these be bigger and bigger numbers? I'm curious. So now we go back to our -1. We go back to -1,000. Let's see what we get. So that bursts down. And yeah, there's more fire and more smoke, so you can see it lasts longer. Now we are getting this faceting, which is interesting. It looks kind of cool. It's almost like a refractive glass, but distinct kind of shaping to that. Let me think. For some reason, I feel like there is a subframe setting or something like. Oh, we do have sub steps. That might just be straight up what we need. I'm gonna make this thicker. By making that thicker, it's almost like we're doubling all of these volumes by itself. Let's see. Yeah, even there, yeah, you can see it's just by being a faster initial thing, there's just more. And even that, we need to go like 10 times faster. But just out of curiosity, let's do one sub-step. And like if I'm correct, every time we double the sub-steps, these are going to kind of do a better job of blending in between each other, potentially. Noise, no noise, so I'll create even more. Okay, let's frame experiment. So I'm going to double it again. Let's double it again. I'll try to see if I can even see a difference. This might be, right now at a glance, I feel like I'm not seeing any difference. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not seeing a difference. So this might be sub-step for generating the smoke, but we need it to be more like it's calculating sub-step. So that puts us back into the pyro scene, pyro object, liquid force factor, min sub-steps, max sub-steps. I thought they had, well, let's just start feeding in some max sub-steps and see what we get. Okay, well, just a couple immediately. That helped a lot. I still see some faceting here, but that seemed to actually have quite a bit. I don't know what sort of a frame hit we get by cranking those up. Interesting. All right, well, let's keep tinkering. We're just getting started here. Pyro. Okay, we need it to fling down 10 times faster still. So now we get all this force flinging this downward. And, air is immediately trying to fight back. That's not necessarily wrong. That's interesting. That's kind of cool. And pretty quickly, I mean, you see that we're getting a pretty large pyro cloud here. And already, even on this machine, that's starting to slow down. But keep in mind that we're still working at our baseline scale. We're working at the scale that this figure's at. So keep in mind, we're usually working on a pyro thing that's about that big. So we're already, I don't know, 30 times bigger than that. So already, just for our sanity, I think we'd have to increase the voxel size. So pyro output, voxel size. I mean, let's double it. But keep in mind, when you double it, it's actually, at this point, a square root, square root, square root. It's half, half, half. So that should be a significant speed up, but also a significant decrease in quality of the simulation. That's kind of cool here, where the trail is going and they're swirling around, and then they're getting pulled back into another area of high velocity. So that getting those spinning around is actually pretty cool. Pretty much, yeah, that's something that we want. That's something that'd be extraordinarily hard to do in just a particle simulation. So letting pyro do the work for us there goes a long way. All right, so now it's actually pushing through. I want to see. It hasn't escaped through the ramp. So seemingly this our splitter is actually doing a pretty good job of splitting it. I'm still kind of operating under the default values, because we're just kind of going for fireball type stuff here, that our default values are going to be doing a pretty good job as far as fading out and whatnot. And that we just want to pipe through more and more temperature, more and more smoke, and that they'll fall off appropriately. But you see here, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. So, and I haven't really worked at this type of scale very often. I remember I tried an early rocket test, but having done that, we're not getting much in the way of smoke specifically. That's striking. I don't know if friction means anything here, but let's say that there's no bounce and no friction. I just want to slide along the front. Maybe that could change things, maybe not. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but I just want us to be able to, we need to be able to iterate. We need to change things as quickly as possible. So my thought is, what if we scoot this over 500? So essentially we've got our entire rig doing its thing, but we're deleting everything on one half of it. So for the most part, we'll just have the pyro shooting down one side. Yeah, so in theory, that should be letting it go about twice as fast, and we can kind of observe one side and then worry about the other. Still decent resolution. We could definitely have a little bit of space to try and speed it up more. It looks pretty cool over here. We're just a little stripe of that's pushing off and definitely curving away. Looks cool. Now, okay, so what are we seeing? I mean, I feel like we just need to fling it even faster. But as we fling it faster, the vorticity is taking over and just sort of terminating it. I wonder if we should pull back. We'll probably end up bringing it back once we have something we want control over more. But I wonder how much our extra forces, our turbulence, and how much our vorticity are sort of killing that acceleration. So let's get rid of the turbulence to start out with. Get this wave going. I mean, what I want to see is like liquid fire working its way down. But then we also have our vorticity. So, okay, like turbulence probably helped a little, but not so much that I care that much. So let's get rid of all the vorticity and just see what that does. We still get the swirls. I thought that was largely what the vorticity did. Curious. I guess it does just, Pyro always behaves like Pyro. I wonder how much, because we've got the smooth spatially, scale with velocity. Well, that's the turbulence. The, yeah, a lot of these settings, no, that one's fine. Shredding's fine. I kind of understand what shredding does. Velocity damping, uniform velocity damping. And we're not damping the velocity at all. It's all 0, so that should be doing nothing. I mean, the settings we got rid of, like it does seem to be moving further out. Or at least quicker. Back to... We're going to double our voxel size again just to let us go quicker. Yeah, so, we're going to start losing some of that. But yeah, I mean, that's approximately what we were seeing before. It's just running quicker for us. So we need to keep on pushing our values further. Pyro. We might increase that temperature still, for sure. Actually, yeah. Actually, why don't we do that? Let's go to our Pyro tag and dramatically increase the temperature. So I'm going to make it 10 times the temperature. Oh, wait. Looks like there's a limit there. Okay, there's a limit here. So we are already almost at max. We might be able to do more temperature add. But if that's not cooperating, then we might need to add in additional variables. If I crank that up, I'm just going to crank this number up as high as it can go as well. Actually, that's interesting. That one's not clamped. But I'm not sure if it's real. Temperature add. Yeah, that doesn't seem any different. So this just feels like we have a lot of temperature, but that temperature is fading off very quickly. So can we tell the temperature to fade very slowly? Will that be a difference? So under temperature, here's our dissipation. I'll drop it down to 1. Let's just see if that fire travels further. Like how much of this is dissipation? Yeah, it's definitely traveling further. .1, 0.5. But of course, as soon as we make those go slower, like now we're pulling away from them behaving realistically on the other variables. So like I wanted to do that just via raising the temperature and whatnot. Let's also, okay, so that's fading, it's taking longer for the temperature to cool down. But let's also try flinging more force at it, which is, we're getting to crazy town here, but why not? It's fun. So we're currently flinging down at 10,000. Let's try 100,000. Okay, it's wigging out. Okay, so that's a tremendous amount of distance being traveled. Let's see. I mean, it's hitting the wall still. Tremendous amount of velocity very quickly. But I mean, this is the type of numbers we're talking about to do this. But yeah, that's getting flung now. I'm impressed that the ramp, the collisions on the ramp seem really good. Like that's actually doing an excellent job of letting the stuff fling out sideways. Now, like we're gonna need a lot more subframes for that to work, but that's something that could be turned on. I still don't love the idea that how much we changed, how much that fire fades out, or how long we're taking it to fade out. I'm gonna try dropping that back down again, and with our 10 times the velocity, how far does our flame get? Yeah, I mean we could start pumping some fuel in there. That's something we could do. And then I mean, some way, like the way it's kind of wisping here, like I like that. That actually looks pretty good. But I also have to say that the density of like our smoke and whatnot feels lacking. So do we add more smoke? Density add. Let's add 1,000. Yeah, I mean that's way more solid. And yeah, so it's losing a little bit of velocity as it gets here, but usually there's still quite a bit of flame happening here, so that's the part that's throwing me off. Yeah, I don't want to just throw more density at it. If the fire can't get more density, more smoke here isn't going to be helping us a ton. Pausing that. I mean, first of all, our pyro box is going to be getting huge, but that's drifting off pretty well. Now we got to be careful with this. I'm going to put this back even at 10. I'm kind of curious what happens at 10. Yeah, now, there's barely any smoke. So you see it's just the fire fading out. But can we put some fuel in there? And what's that going to do? I'm just curious. I don't use fuel very often because it does very specific things. But yeah, putting some fuel in there, that's, immediately creating tons of extra smoke. Like I said, realistically, we're not trying to burn any fuel. Let's see, double checking. I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any. Yeah, Thomas, you're right. It's steam, not smoke, but because they've got like water jets and whatnot in there. But we're using pyro, so I refer to it as smoke. But yeah, essentially at that point we just lower the density so that we're seeing through here. So it's a little more like white fluffy clouds and not black clouds. It's the only difference. But yeah, getting that extra fuel in there, that's definitely giving us these big old clouds. Perhaps too much. We can lower that down, but there is a setting inside of the pyro. If you go to maybe it's fuel combustion, and this sort of defines what the fuel is doing. So the fuel burning rate, and it's like how much temperature are we getting per fuel, and then how much density are we getting per fuel. So I'm going to say that we're getting 10 times as much temperature as that fuel burns. And the hope here is that we can get a little bit more of a fireball going. Okay, we definitely have a little bit more of a fireball going. So yeah, now we're getting flame traveling through there. That's not bad. In some ways, it's better than I thought we were going to be getting. It's not bad, not bad. I mean, we're flinging it pretty well. Like now that we have that much force going downward, that's flinging sideways quite nicely. It's making me want to maybe subdivide our cube and let these flare out a little bit. We'll do that. So our flame trench gets wider as it goes, which I think they do. And We'll grab our clone and spin it 180. So it's also flaring out. Grab our extrude and make it wider. So it's capturing the entire thing. And that should be able to get wider. And I don't know if the velocities will kind of do that calculation, but as it widens, then that should allow it to travel upward more. You can see that we still got quite the fireball there that was pressed up against the wall. So kind of curious what that will do. I'll give that a save, and then we'll continue under a new number just in case we go in a different direction. Boom. We could lower the amount of fuel that we're flinging overall, but like as this burns, we're going to end up with smoke after the fact. Actually, you can see, yeah, you see over here because we're getting so much fuel, so much less fuel sneaking through that just starts being more of the smoke. But yeah, eventually, I do kind of want that to be like a fireball traveling a little bit. And again, we didn't even look at reference, so I'm just going from memory. But that's actually not, that's not bad. That's not bad. Generally, I kind of want to, well, I want this to feel like it's traveling upward a little bit more, but, and then even the force could be pushing. I don't know. We just have to let it go more because this is still the initial push. That's losing velocity, but more stuff is coming in and it's going to be also pushing out. Escaping our flame trench. It's still chugging along. Definitely couldn't have done this on the old machine. Dean, I didn't want to lower the dissipation in this one because I wanted like the fireball and everything to be able to like exist. So I was trying to leave those at the defaults and just keep on increasing the amount of stuff we were flinging at the back, because eventually we do want it to fade out. Like these don't exist forever. We kind of get this, you know, well, as was mentioned, a cloud of steam kind of swirling and just fading out into nothing. And we could visually lower or even physically lower the amount of density here so we get more of a white cloud to represent the steam. And even along those lines, like I think we can start visualizing that maybe. So we have that is the density. I don't think the density just has to be a color. I was trying to think if there's a way of visualizing it, but right now we just got everything pouring through. It's shaded. So that, yeah, I would just have to start, especially I think the main thing we'd have to do is under fuel. Under, where's our definition of fuel? Oh, there, fuel combustion. Under our definition of fuel, we have our temperature, which I think we got pretty well. There's still some flame in there, but we're also generating a lot of density. So if I lower that density, lower the density, then this smoke will be lessened. And if it's lessened, they'll be lighter looking. And there's also pressure per fuel, which is kind of cool, which is like the stuff wants to escape that area. And I wonder if increasing the pressure there would make it want to plume upward more. Now, I don't know that we actually want it to plume upward more. But yeah, our frames, you know, we haven't run out of RAM. This machine's got an insane amount of RAM, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do. So, you know, potentially we need to make the voxels even bigger again if we wanted to try and speed it up. And I would be kind of curious about increasing the pressure. But yeah, that's looking kind of cool. Okay, a couple tweaks. That's looking good. Some tweaks I want to do just to speed this up. Pause it, rewind. This little destructor box is cool, but I'm going to make it 10 times the size and scoot it over 10 times the amount. So now None of that's going to be able to escape on the other side of the cloud, on the other side of the wall. So our bounding box should be half the size, which should dramatically help. It could be a bad, but let's just try increasing our voxel size again, just to see if we can speed things up. I'll jump to 40, which should cut it down dramatically. And we just cut the smoke down a bunch. Let's hit play, see what we get. Yeah, the bigger size, you can see immediately it's going a lot faster. So yeah, with the density being 1/5 of what it used to be, you can see that we're getting a fluffier looking burst here. But of course, it's like if you want things to look amazing and super duper detailed, you need your voxels to be tiny, and we keep making it bigger, which is obviously making it go faster. Like that was way faster than last time. Temperature's up pretty high. I kind of want, what do I want? I want the density to fade out slower. I will do that. We'll just let the steam be steam for a while. So back to our output. Density, drop it to 2. I'm dropping it to 2. I might even lower it more. And then out of pure curiosity, under our fuel combustion, we're currently outputting 1 fuel. I'm going to put down to 0.5. So it's going to be even thinner, but it'll live longer. And then I'm going to double the pressure. I'm just curious what it'll do with more pressure. I hit save, blast, lots of pressure. That extra pressure should make it want to spread out more. That's what pressure is going to be doing for us here. And more pressure is going to be pushing out in all directions. As the fuel burns, it's pushing back against the stuff that's pushing us forward. Like there's a lot of layers of things happening. I thought maybe the more pressure would push things up. They're not pushing up as much. Now, it's entirely possible that the NASA ramps are like tilted up. So that's actually going to be like intentionally flinging things upward. It's not necessarily something we need. You'll also see that these are immediately pushing down as soon as there's no ramp for it to collide with. And that's, potentially showing the pressure as well. All the stuff wants to go upward, but this extra pressure we have is being like spread out, like push away from each other. And it's also pushing down. And honestly, the more it pushes down, the more it's not pushing up. So, why don't we make another floor here? T for scale, 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 scale. Make a huge floor. Hopefully that will do some okay calculation or some okay collisions for us. And we'll say that's also a collider. Just for our purposes, why don't we hide these sidewalls so we can just see more of it? And let me think. Yeah, I want more upward movement, but like this pressure we have, like the speed that we have this flinging out, I think is actually pretty good. Like I am pleased with the amount that's deflecting with pure geometry. Like that's cool. Dean agreed about the material, but we haven't even added the material here. I'm just trying to get to look a particular way in the viewport. The fire, we are having it burn a lot, but like it's supposed to dissipate, but there's just a lot of red going on there. I wanted more of the fireball looking thing, and it's less. It feels less like that. Flinging, still not traveling upward. The plane is doing an excellent job of colliding. Man, Pyro does a good job of colliding. With all the trouble we have with like rigid bodies, like Pyro handles it no problem. When you consider the velocity we're flinging this out at, you imagine a particle being able to handle that. Like I love the way we've got the fire down here, but I don't love this red cloud that we're getting around it. And I'm not sure what to make of that. At a certain point, I like the values being as close to vanilla as possible. Let's try, I'm going to try reintroducing a couple of variables. Let's try and put our extra forces. Let's re-enable our smooth spatially. Let's just do that one to start out with, see if it dramatically changes anything we see. Hard to tell, but that looks very different. Maybe the smooth spatially is super important. That seems to be, maybe I just have to give it a few more frames, but that seems to be making everything nearby take on the nearby velocities more? Because that feels like it's drifting up more, and the red clouds are very different. Or maybe I just didn't go enough frames, and these will start dissipating. Maybe it's exactly the same. Okay, now it's going back to what it looked like. So maybe that did nothing. And maybe that does nothing unless there's some strength. I'm not sure. Let's try, well, vorticity. We'll put that back to 5. I'm curious what this will do. Because that, in our other tests, like vorticity, it always has a pretty major effect on what we're seeing. But it's not really helping with our little red mist problem. Look at the way these are dissipating. I wonder if that's the pressure. All that pressure I started throwing in. Maybe that pressure is not a good thing. Pressure 1. Start over. Look how it expands immediately as it escapes those walls. It's really curious the way, do you see how we get these lovely plumes and then they just sort of like explode? They kind of like vaporize. Not quite. I mean, maybe that was just something with a lot of force and they're still in all that temperature. It is curious. Can we're throwing a lot of temperature out there. Should there not be that much? Let's make it 1/5 of what it currently is. Luckily, we're, given the setup we just did, we have it fading out pretty quickly. That's interesting. Well, now you see there's just a lot less fire. I liked all that fire being inside there. And by having there be a lot less fire, obviously there's a lot less fire. Fuel burning rate. I wonder if that's a variable. Like, are we not burning the fuel fast enough? That's something that always throws me off. I don't have a good instinct for it. Let's say that the fuel is going to burn 10 times as fast. Let's see what that looks like. It could be dramatically different. There's a large wall of fire there, but that means that the fuel, however much fuel we are throwing out there, burns quickly. And I feel like I'm changing all the settings and not a lot of things are visually changing. I thought that would have been pretty quick. Or I thought that would be pretty dramatic, but like on another level, it looks kind of identical to what we just had. Now, are we just at like dramatically different quantities than I think or thought? Like that burned pretty quick. There's not a lot of orangey glow as we move in. I love the way that the smoke looks on those corners. Like that inside of actual launch footage, that bit feels really good. Where the velocity of the flame going by is like yanking the smoke super fast along the side. Yeah, this red mist that we're getting is kind of driving me crazy. I thought that maybe that we had fuel and that fuel was continuously burning, and so we were getting some light fire. But I'm kind of feeling like it's not. I'm going to lower the ignition temperature. See if that's any different. Because it looks good here, but then eventually you see that all starts puffs away, and we're left with these red glows. So again, we're making massive changes to the number. And it just doesn't feel very different. Like, okay, just out of curiosity, let's do 100 times the pressure. This should be dramatic. Yeah, I feel like that should be dramatic, and I feel like it's no different. I mean, maybe we're just not throwing that much fuel out there. I mean, this is burning a lot down there, and that feels like it is billowing out further. It didn't help with our red mist, but I do like these flames pushing further. Now, could we just, I don't like changing the setting, but could we just have the temperature fade quicker? Is this red glow the temperature? So I will double our dissipation for temperature. We still have lovely fire here, but once this puff disappears, is the red... Oh, well, okay, that one actually seemed to have made a change. Like now we're getting less of that red glow, but we still have plenty of this fire pumping through. So where there is fuel, we're still getting plenty. Let's double check how much fuel we're spinning out. Yeah, right now it's very, honestly, it's very little. We're throwing out a lot of the rest of it. But if I get rid of that, let's just see how different it looks. Oh, a lot different. That fuel is clearly doing a lot. So let's play more with the fuel. Wow, I can't believe how different that is. Almost everything's coming from the fuel. Okay, it's madness, but let's do 100 times just to get a baseline. So 100 times of fuel. Boom. Massive fireball. It's still going to be fading out twice as fast as it usually does. But now we get this big old fireball getting forward. More fuel means more fire. It also means more temperature, to be specific. And it also means that with 10 times the amount of fuel, there's now 10 times as much of the smoke being created. So obviously a lot more solid, a lot more fuel, like all that, all of that still counts. And it is like puffing out like quite a bit. That's actually not super far off from, as far as the way these are billowing out. Now we put a lot there. Let's try 20. So that's double what the original number was. But also there's like the burn rate of things. So there's like how much fuel are you putting in the system and how quickly does that fuel burn? And I feel like it's burning pretty quick right now. That's pretty good. I feel like we got a pretty good balance there. Like I love the look of this flame getting that far into there. I feel like usually you'd see maybe some fire like spiraling out still, but we've got this looking better than I thought we would. We start getting this lovely smoke sort of just drifting out from the edges. A lot of this goes back to how do we want to visualize any of those things? Can we? Yeah, there's the density multiplier and whatnot. So you also, I don't like doing this, but you also have the option of just being like, well, don't change the density, just draw it differently. So now I've made it draw 1/10 of the amount. It's 1/10 of the thickness here. And so we're immediately making that look a lot more like steam. It's not super white and fluffy. The emission scale. Yeah, it's making that brighter. Oh, the absorption coefficient. Yeah, this is also another important one. Let me put that back to 1. And then say, yeah, it's taking on light a lot brighter. So it's like a little bit easier for that light to get through. Yeah, combining those. So, but anyway, like this is just changing the way it looks in the viewport. Like none of that's actually changing the way it would look in the render. So you'd have to do all those settings via the Pyro material. And it just goes to, it takes so many frames for us to get to this point. That'd be pretty difficult to, well, I guess maybe, can you do that in the viewport? Like I'm a little skeptical of us trying to start making it look nice in the render right now. That would probably eat up a lot of time. It'd be somewhat tedious. So actually, yeah, I'm just not going to worry about that right now. I will say, like, the way these get like kind of weird and wispy, that's throwing me off a little bit. We don't have, well, I guess we did turn on the turbulence. Not the turbulence. We don't have turbulence as far as I know. We have 0 strength, but we do have the smooth spatially. But we also used to have that off. And I don't think it made it look any different. Or at least it was really hard to tell the difference there. Yeah, I think they're going to, yeah, you see they're wisping away in the exact same way. Yeah, not 100% sure about that. But anyway, like I said, we got this further than I thought we would. The experimentally things that we could tinker. Well, first of all, it's like if we get this kind of looking the way we want to, like what I think we did pretty well here. Like I'm not unhappy with the way that is bursting out. then I would start potentially reintroducing smaller voxel sizes where we can cut that in half, which is actually times two, times two, times two, more complex. So keep in mind, that's a massive increase. But, it's like all the same force and everything are still at play. That should be super bright. That should be blowing the camera out. So I actually don't have a problem with that being insanely bright at the origin. We could fake it to be dimmer, but realistically speaking, that should be blowing things out. That this seems a little bit brighter as it goes, but look at the smoke over here. Like, just look how much better that looks by us doubling, by cutting the voxel size in half. Like, massive change there. The hope here would be that the behavior would continue to be pretty similar. So design it at your low resolution. Having said that, this feels before, weren't we getting kind of those fiery streaks going across here? But now we still got this fireball leading the way, and all I do is change our voxel size. So maybe more things are affecting that than I thought. But maybe once this gets to the end, I mean, it's going to go slower and slower. But as this burns itself out, and then we get our steam at the end, maybe just like little bits of fire would be kind of showing their way. Because like this whole thing is getting dramatically dimmer as it goes further, as the fuel, as well as the temperature fades away. And what's funny is temperature is mostly fading. Well, the temperature is fading away 15% per frame, but it's also just expanding. And as it expands, it loses that percentage of the temperature. If it's filling double the space, it has half the temperature in any given unit of space. I mean, it's moving forward really nicely. And we could, pretty sure the computer could handle this, going out as a render. I don't know how much we could keep on increasing our voxel size. But honestly, we haven't even done much special here. Like, we're just kind of throwing, more fuel, more smoke, like more temperature, just trying to figure out exactly what ratios we want. It's pretty okay looking fireball there. We don't have the turbulence on there, and it's like at this point that maybe some turbulence would look pretty good. Something more so that I'm curious about is, now that we're going so insanely fast, could we get that to smooth itself out at all? And is there a level that's kind of like, yeah, that's going to blow out and it's going to be moving so fast that you should just fake it, like put a really bright cylinder or something there, and once they've had a chance to separate themselves out here, let the pyro sort of take over. But having said that, if we just watch the first couple of frames, which of course will run fast, how much can we calm those down? So that mostly, we've got our sub steps here. If I put this back to 0 sub steps, I'm just curious. Yeah, like those are blinking. I would be surprised if, it doesn't even know how to handle that. It's moving so fast that it's just got nothing. So we were at 10, but let's try jumping up to 20. And yeah, essentially it seems to just cut the space in half. So half the space. So we'd have to crank that up to maybe 50 to get those start blending in. But those sub steps are actually, no, I'm surprised. 50 is not enough for those to blend. Actually, honestly, it doesn't look that different from what we had. I wonder if the min sub steps, if it's intelligently trying to figure those out. Interesting. I also wonder if the pyro sub steps themselves are needed. Like, if I give that one sub step, look at the spacing. We kind of got like a full-size gap in between the first one. If we give it a sub step, no, sub step didn't affect that. Let's jump that up to a few more. I just thought maybe they were not emitting enough. We went up to 50. I'll tell that to go 50. I don't, if it, well, it's just to verify. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be doing anything. So those sub steps, no good. Just out of curiosity, I will switch this back to regular surface because maybe sparse does something different there. I don't know. But we saw that with the other one. Let's hit play. Oh, that does do something dramatically different. As soon as I turned it to surface, so like with regular kind of things, maybe sparse works. But as soon as we start getting to these extremes, those other ones are good. They take longer to calculate, but maybe they are still good. So now, I think, I don't know, with surface, that might suddenly be throwing out a lot more pyro as well. Because like, look at this back drive a little bit. Like, that just might be throwing out so much fuel now. We're like pure white from the sheer amount. That just might be generating insane amounts of pressure. Curious, very curious. That could change like almost every number that we have here, though. I am curious. Let's turn off fuel. Yeah, okay, so that is largely the fuel back driving, but it seems like we're generating just a lot more of it by. Yeah, it's curious. When I first did tests on that, I very explicitly tested the sparse, and I was pretty sure that they mostly seemed to work overall, but I'm glad we're testing these different modes because that's pretty different. Okay, and then we can reactivate our fuel. And currently we're sending out 10 fuel, but we saw that was so much it immediately started back driving. I'll lower it to 1. And even that's interesting. Oh, did I just change density? Yeah, I just I changed the wrong number. Fuel. Let's drop. I'll drop it to 1. 20 is too much. 1 is not back driving. Yeah, with 1 fuel, you see that's burning itself out pretty quick. That's not so bright for so long. It is super curious how much the fuel was the contributor here. But yeah, look how much better the plume looks now. Same speed, but yeah, without the fuel, that's just not going to propagate as far. 5 times the fuel. There's still that there's that bit of plume that's going up. So I wonder if we'd have to increase the velocity more. Oh, also because we changed that. I wonder if we had to increase the speed that we're flinging it down. Because, oh yeah, I was trying to remember what I was going to do. I was going to lower our sub steps again because are we doing a lot of unnecessary calculations? Let's go 0, 0 now that we've got the this emitter. Whoa! Okay, that's interesting. That's just the pure fuel exploding. So let's give ourselves 5 sub steps. And now I actually can push down for those calculations. Okay, that's curious. Let's try going back up to 55-ish. And now they fling down way more. Okay, interesting. Max substeps there being very important for the way it's interacting with that fuel. Yeah, I don't want to lose the plot here. So, do we have a tiny, potentially little? Do we have a tiny question that we could tackle as we go? Before I try and do the tutorial. I remember we're going to try to do the part of my plan here is we're going to try and make this cool little section of slicer animation as a tutorial. So getting all these different figures. So that's the plan after this. So do we have a small question to tackle here? I was going to try, and as I wait for people to see that what I just said, I was going to make that go faster. So we've got our velocity. And right now it's going minus 100,000 already. Let's try doubling it. Yeah, wow. Okay, so like we could still add more speed. You see that even without adding more sub steps, if we push it down first faster, that fuel didn't have time to like go and explode too early. But man, there's got to be so much fuel there. It's crazy. It's almost like there's like those sub steps aren't like generating more pyro. They're not generating all these units of generation. Like they're not creating more density and temperature and fuel per frame per like sub step, are they? Like that'd be kind of crazy if they were, because like it's so bright. It's so much fuel, but all we've ever done here is reduce the amount of fuel. It's so bright. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that we cranked the temperature to the absolute highest it possibly could be, but that looks pretty good. We still have the high voxel count, so that's going to go slow. But now that we're tapering out to the color, I kind of dig how blown out that is. But yeah, I mean, we threw all of our variables out the window by changing a few things. So I think there's going to be a whole gigantic art form of just getting an intuition for getting these types of velocities to look good. There's probably a lot of velocity blending. There's the shredding variable, and that's where stuff like wants to push apart or pull towards each other. That could be a factor. Actually getting this to render properly, that could be a factor. Seeing how long we get the steam to linger, like that's a factor. And just for fun, as I wrap this up, why don't we turn off that destructor and let's actually let our entire rig go, which is going to blast on both sides. Get this dual plume going. Purely blown out. And then next couple of frames should start fading out to a little bit of orange and red. But yeah, double the pyro now, double the size of the calculation box here. I am curious if there's a relationship between the subframes, the substeps, and the quantity of material that's coming out from the pyro emitter. It's pretty important. But this gives me hope that we could explore this further. You know, maybe there'd be a tutorial here somewhere in the future. This would require more research. I'd have to do a lot more A and B. And even if I found good settings, I would like, I don't make a tutorial unless I understand what's happening. Yeah, I could be like, hey, here's a recipe, type in the recipe. But I want to explain how we got to the recipe and how you could modify the recipe to make it what you want it to be. So, yeah. Let's see. The auto mod is blocking a little bit. I'm going to try to stop that. Nope. That's no good. That's still good. Yeah, I don't know how to activate that. But yeah, I do dig the way that looks. Let's see, Le Badger. This would be a cool sim to advect some particles. Yeah, I suppose so. Squishy pixel. Tomato. I think the plume of water is happening almost immediately. Like it's just running through it. So I think it's all one continuous force. No need to add like an actual water layer on to any degree here. But that's looking pretty good. Remember that we're looking through some invisible walls here. That ooh, there we go. Yeah, where are they? Yeah, that's actually blocking it for our flame trench. But I dig it. It's cool. Okay, any follow-up question? I am digging the way it looks. We'd have to push it further, and we could let it keep on calculating more. We could keep on decreasing the voxel size so that it's more and more detailed. We could potentially add that volume back in again, or sorry, the turbulence. So let's go to Pyro output, and let me see. Yeah, we could reactivate our turbulence and then put that back to the default. No idea how that would look. I just stopped it from going on that side. But let's just see what a few frames of the turbulence being in there looks like. It could break apart everything a little bit faster. It's hard to tell, but I do feel like we're seeing a little bit of the color peek in on the top quicker because of that turbulence. Without the turbulence, it's going to be maintaining the condensed state for longer. Yeah. Well, in this case, that turbulence seems to be helping, where it is introducing the variation a lot quicker. And keep in mind, we literally did not add any extra forces in here. We didn't put any turbulence. We didn't put any wind. And we didn't look at any reference, which is, something of a problem. But I didn't want to spend much time Googling. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. But yeah, I think I'm going to call that one there. So thank you so much for the question. Very on theme. Very on theme. for the launch today. Best of luck to the astronauts going around the moon. Carlo, thank you so much for subscribing with Prime. That's always appreciated. It's another nice way of supporting Rocket Lasso. I suppose while we're on the topic, if you head on over to the Rocket Lasso web, go to rocketlasso.com. You can go to the community tab up at the top, and you can join the Slack channel. So come and join us. And you can get some live alerts about when the live streams are starting, and there's little contests that happen, and just join the community of people. And if you want, you can scroll down here and you can join the newsletter, get information, especially about new plugins and whatnot. Then we have of course, the Rocket Lasso Patreon, so you get early access to the replays, get early access to tutorials, get access to the scene files. And if you just like what we do, then of course you can buy Rocket Lasso some coffee. But I think we're going to move on to the tutorial portion. Yep, right around there. Okay, so hello, everybody. Yeah, lots of people coming in and saying hello. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming and hanging out. Okay, so for anybody who has not been here the last couple of weeks, I, for this season, have been trying to get more tutorials out. And the way I'm forcing myself to do more tutorials is to just continue this long live stream to be even longer, and I try and record a tutorial live in front of you. It worked for 2 weeks in a row, which was great. Last week we tried, and then it just wasn't quite working. So I had to spend another day researching and another day recording the tutorial. And that is one that isn't live yet, but I did show a little preview of it. Let's see if I can pull that preview up again. That was in the renderer. I can never find there, pitch viewer. So we got a lot of Pyro renders now. There we go. I was working on a thumbnail. I still have more work to do on the thumbnail, but yeah, this is the tutorial that I recorded on Friday. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I think it's going to be really cool. Honestly, in some ways, it makes me think of some of the earliest Rocket Lasso tutorials where we were doing like the destruction. And this one's supposed to be like, yeah, it's a guy running with electricity. But I think through the video, we make 7 different electrical. Oh, I should be showing my screen, shouldn't I? So here's the thumbnail. But over the course of the tutorial, the 2-hour tutorial, I make, I think, 7 different rigs of doing different aspects of electricity. So you don't need to know all of them. You can jump around. I'll have time codes to like each one, but like, one's for doing these trails, and one's for getting the outline in the character, and a different one's for having these lines kind of zapping randomly around the character. So some of the rigs work with just vanilla cinema. Some of the rigs require some Rocket Lasso plugins, but, and I really did try a week ago to record the tutorial with no plugins, but we ran into some limitations that honestly only Rocket Lasso plugins could fix. So anyway, that'll be a good one. Looking forward to it. Let's see if I can get that to cache. So, and we intentionally worked with a figure that was stumbling. So let that run a little bit. Yeah, that's as much as it can cache for right now. Maybe. Yeah, so anyway, really cool, coherent electrical zaps traveling along the character. So pretty cool. I dig it. It's fun. Let's close up these scene files. There's that thumbnail file. There's an earlier thumbnail file. There's a thumbnail from that one when I copy and pasted the logos out from it. Okay. Am I prepared? Mostly. Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Okay, so if you're new here, first of all, thank you so much for hanging out. Get new questions ready. Get new questions ready for next week. Also, I know I'm recording a tutorial here, but I will at various points, because I have to edit the tutorial afterward anyway. If you have a question about what's happening, or if you want to see a different aspect of it, put it in the chat and I can work it into the tutorial. I'll pause, I'll read, I'll interact a little bit, and I'll go back to recording and I'll be able to work things in. So already some things got worked into the very first tutorial because some people were asking about various aspects of it in the chat. So that's actually a really cool aspect of doing it live that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So that's cool. And because it's a raw tutorial, you're going to see me stumble at certain parts, try and repeat certain parts. If I stumble over my words, I'm going to re-record that little section. And sometimes we can go for like 5 minutes and be like, oh, dang it, I completely forgot about some important aspect and I have to rewind and redo that part. So it's going to be I'm trying to make what looks more like a structured tutorial, so it puts a little extra effort in there. But in any case, I think we are ready. And just a quick warning, I don't do it too loud, but when I'm editing, I do a little clap for syncing things up and for edit points so I can see it really easily in the timeline. So while we're watching, I'm going to be randomly doing some claps in there. But besides that, I do believe I'm ready to start recording. Or I'm already recording, so I'm ready to start properly. So hello, everybody. It's Chris Schmidt from Rocket Lasso, and we're doing another tutorial today. This is an episode recorded in front of a live studio audience, and it is going to be tackling, I'll switch on over to my desktop. We're going to be tackling some of these really cool slicer animated characters here. So let me hit play on that. And these are just a bunch of characters pulled out from the asset browser, but I'm using the Rocket Lasso plugin to slice them up in all these different ways. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to actually walk through how to make these various rigs and talk about some of the aspects of Slicer that I've never really gotten to talk about. I'm going to jump back up on screen again. Something worth mentioning is if you're supporting on Patreon, you can actually get massive discounts off of the plugins. So pretty much the more you support on Patreon, if you support at $20, then you actually get $21 off of the plugin. And keep in mind, that would be for each of the different plugins. So that's a great way of getting discounts and supporting Rocket Lasso. But let's jump into Cinema 4D. Let's jump on into Cinema 4D. I'm in 2026.1.3, and we need something to be animating on. And that is going to be similar to the previous tutorial. We're going to be grabbing some motion capture. And this time, what motion capture do we like? Well, let's actually match what I had before. So we've got this cheering. We've got this cheering here. It's a very tiny animated plugin. That's jumping around. Actually, I kind of dig this one. It's doing a lot of motion, kind of jumping up and down. So opening that up, I can hit play. And we'll see the character kind of idling, then jumping and clapping, and it terminates really quickly. But I imagine that this timeline is got a bunch of keyframes. I don't know how long they are, so let's stretch this out. Let's type in 333. And yeah, you can see that this is actually going all the way up to something like 230. And I don't think we need to worry about looping the animation or anything this time. So I'll just tick this down until we kind of see the full bit of it right there. It's looking pretty good. Okay, cool. So hitting play, we've got our character, and it's static, and then jumps around, cheering, and then eventually kind of goes back to that same default pose, and it should be pretty close to looping. Now, I would like some sort of mesh to link to. We're going to do the exact same process that we did last time. Under models, I just need a blob of geometry that looks vaguely human. So under the models tab in the asset browser, I will search for the word male, and I'm just grabbing this one because we're in this T-pose. I suppose it would also work on the female body as well. Yeah, this T-pose is matching the skeleton really well. So let's try the female bust on this time. Actually, not bust, but that is called, give me the full file name. Oh yeah, female base. Let me redo a little bit of that. Under models, let's search for the word male and scroll down. And actually, last time we used the male base. This time, let's scroll down a little further, and we can grab, or is it just the word? Okay, sorry, I messed that up again. Can we search the word base, and does that pop up? Yeah, we can search for the word base and find it. It's in a specific folder, but searching is good. Just like last time, let's search inside the models category, and I'll search for the word base. And last time we used the male base, but this time I think the female base works just as well, because this rig, you see, matches the skeleton, or the skeleton matches his body really, really closely. So if I were to grab my cheering, I can select the character definition tag, click go to reference pose, which is this lovely T pose. And all we have to do is grab the arm, rotate until it's pretty much in alignment with the character. And I could grab the shoulder and pull it down, but honestly, the amount we're going to be blobbing this, I don't think it needs to be too fancy. Whoops. Sorry, I just hit, I moved it on the wrong axis, and I hit undo, and as soon as you hit undo, it resets back to its animated pose. So I just have to do that little chunk again. on our mocap cheering, there's a tag called the character definition tag. If we click go to reference pose, it's going to go into this perfect T pose. And this character is really close to that shape. So selecting the arm, I should be able to hit R for rotate and spin this until it's pretty dang close there. I just want that wrist to approximately match. The elbow is not quite perfect, but I think it'll be good enough for what we need. And we'll grab the other arm and just eyeball it and do the exact same thing there. Then middle mouse button click your mocap. Middle mouse button click your what did I call mocap rig, but I keep seeing mocha prig. Middle mouse button click the mocap rig hips, and that'll select the entire hierarchy, and then hold down Control or Command, select the model, and man, hard to get through sentences. And then we can move up to the character menu and click bind. And now that character should be bound to it. Hit play. And now the character should be animated and it's doing a fine job getting deformed and jumping around based on that skeleton. Now, I mentioned this in the previous tutorial that there's going to be a bunch of pinching and whatnot here. Some of it doesn't matter for what we're doing, but you see that especially these elbows are getting really messed up. It won't be perfect, but if we grab the deformer, the Delta Mush, which is hiding right here, I can grab that and drop that after the skin deformer, and you see it's going to do a pretty significant job of deforming the rest of the body to match a little bit better. Now you can do additional iterations and try and really squish things in that you could start deforming the body in strange ways, but if it makes it look a little bit better, then I think that works pretty well. And you can see you can also smooth the view. Look at this weird blobbing, just melting the whole thing away. So anyway, that's just going to make it a little bit better, twists a little bit nicer. So for our purposes, I think that's working great. Now, for Slicer, I think it's going to be a good idea for us to put this entire animated character inside of a volume builder, because what's going to happen all the time when you animate characters like this is their hands pass through the body, the shoulders are going to pass through the torso, the legs might cross each other, and then you end up with geometry that's intersecting, and intersecting geometry just causes all sorts of problems all over the place. I'm going to give this file a save before we go too far. And I'll jump in. Actually, I've just been leaving them in that one. So, and just so it's not calling attention, I'm going to name it Untitled 7. So it just keeps on being called what it is. And it'll look like I never saved in the tutorial. I can give people stress. Okay. So let's feed this into a volume builder. I'll hold down Alt as I click it, and that gets fed into a volume mesher. And you can see it looks like this weird little potato right now, but let's select the builder, dramatically decrease the voxel size so that we actually get some character definition here, maybe even dropping this down to 2. And then we need a little extra thickness on here. So I'll grab a dilate in the road, and you see that's going to inflate everything too much by default, but let's try an offset of 1. That's pretty good. The fingers are almost back. And I don't even need these fingers to be like really detailed individually. So we can push that out as much as we want or decrease our voxel size as much as we want. But at a certain point, it's like everything's going to inflate too much. And we still have these kind of mittens going. So I think just a little bit of extra inflating works pretty well there. So honestly, that's all I need to work from. So most of our time now is going to be inside of my Rocket Lasso plugin, Slicer. Let me think. So we can start out with the absolute basics and then talk about all the various rigs. So without animating anything. Yeah, you can see we've got all these. So I can talk about, I'm going to treat this as a series of individual rigs as we go. This will be cut out. Yeah, every time we go to make a slightly different rig, that'll be like an edit point, and that will be like a different time code I can call out. So, somebody's not necessarily expected to watch the entire tutorial. Now, a lot of these are actually there's not a ton of variation going on them, but a couple of them are pretty different. Okay. To clean this up a little bit, let's hide our skeleton. We don't need that anymore. And then under my plugins, because I have purchased my Rocket Lasso Slicer plugin. Under extensions, I can find Rocket Slicer. Creating that, I can now drop my geometry directly inside of it if I like. But even better, I like pulling it after the hierarchy, changing the source geometry to objects mode, and now I can remote link into that geometry. So it's kind of free to be copied around and linked and be used separately instead of it being consumed by this generator object. There's also this handy eyeball button right here, and I can say hide that mesh, and it'll actually just make that disappear for us by hiding the two stoplights. So you can see now that I've got a series of geometry slices in between, and I'm free to grab the slicer and move it wherever I like. So I can scoot this up, and you see as I do, it's passing through the body. For now, I'll temporarily show it, and you see I want to cover the entire body here. But I probably want to go extra tall because if we scrub our timeline here, the character is going to jump and the hands are going to pass out of the range a little bit. So grabbing my slicer, I can just grab this handy little widget dot there and make it tall enough to always capture the character. Now, there are going to be, in theory, some slices that are completely missing the character, but those are barely taking any calculation time because they completely missed. But now we're free to move into the slicer and start adding as many slices as we like. I can start increasing this, and you can see we're subdividing more and more and more as we go. So now, re-hiding that mesh, you can see that we've got tons of slices showing the definition of the body really well. Windbush in the house, what's going on? From here, we kind of have unlimited potential of the way we want to use this as raw material. This is just a series of splines. So one look we could do is just throw this into a sweep, and I'll give that let's do a simple rectangle. It's way too big, so we'll drop it to 1, 1. And now you can see that those lines are being swept around. Nice and super duper clean. And you see where like the shoulder is barely catching the rest of the shape, and they just blend perfectly into each other. This is where that intersecting geometry might break things, and that's why we put the entire thing into that volume mesher. And anyway, now we've got that character, and we've got a series of sweeps going around it. I can grab the rocket slicer, and I can do things like rotate this, and we can angle it. So you can see that's going to look pretty cool on the character. We can grab the rectangle shape and start adding various heights or thicknesses, like pushing that further. Now it's made of this series of ribbons, and we can make these ribbons super thin. And we get this really cool striped effect that that looks really cool. But then we can do the opposite and make that maybe a little bit thinner and start adding extra width onto it and start getting these really thin slices spinning outward. So if I show you that, you see these thin kind of cross sections going through. And in a lot of ways, you can think of this stuff almost like you could laser cut these shapes out. Don't quite like that. I almost like to think of some of these cross sections almost like the shape I would cut out from a laser cutter. And I've actually I did a little mini tutorial one time for a tech support where somebody needed to laser cut. I showed them how they could explode out all the layers separately, so you could send it out to a laser cutter. If anybody wants to know that process, like please let me know and I can make a tutorial. So anyway, you see these super duper basics here that we have the slicer, and it's able to create slices at any angle that we like. I can grab this and spin it and rotate it any orientation, and every time we move this to a new direction, it's kind of giving us a completely new look. Now that's just putting it inside of a sweep. We can yank that out, and let's zero out that rotation. And for now, I don't need that sweep. We can always remake it. Saved again. Oh boy. Lesion? Is that how you would pronounce his name? Lesion Digital? Thank you for coming hanging out. Thomas, thanks. Badger. Everybody's coming and hanging out. Thank you so much for chilling with me. Okay, continuing. Let's talk about the geometry modes inside of the slicer. Now, you might think that the slicer is purely a spline tool, but that is not true. Inside of the slicer, we can go to the geometry tab, and you can see that we can return geometry, which says none. I probably should have had that say spline, but it's returning no geometry. It's just returning splines. But we can say, hey, return flat geometry. Let's activate let's activate options SSAO, and now you can see there's a little separation there, and now we get these little flat layers kind of giving these cross sections of the character right away. It's kind of giving like this mummy look So that looks pretty cool. And it's just another style that you can do. Again, at any point, grab my slicer, rotate it to be a different angle, and get completely different looking things. But yeah, there's geometry straight out of Slicer, as optimized as we could make it. We can also set this to be extruded, and the extruded has a really cool mode. We can set an absolute thickness here, but then we can say, give me a percentage thickness. So at 100%, it'll perfectly close it off, and you can see how the entire thing is being generated. It looks like this really cool stack of different layers. Selecting the slicer, we can always go back and create fewer slices, and you'll see that percentage is always combining them. So as I decrease this, we're still getting a character and everything is still stacking nicely. And if I were to hit play, we're still getting the animation. Like, look how different that looks, but still that same character just getting translated through to this really thick extrude. So stylistically giving even more options. Actually, something I'm not super sure about. I want to check. If we go to spread and we do variation, yeah, the percentage isn't per layer, so that's no good. So no need to mention that. I'll increase those slices back up again a bit, and you'll notice that we have a setting called rate here. And if I set that to a little bit of a rate, we can actually have these layers start traveling up through the character. You see when the character's not moving too much, how these are all traveling up through. Now we can't, I'll lower it back down again. We can't make it move too fast because if they move too fast, you'll just see one layer jump to be what looks like the next. But we can actually have these traveling through, which is another cool effect, especially on some sort of static object. Let's see. This might end up being a relatively short tutorial, honestly. Let me take a peek at the various ones, because we kind of already covered that spline. I don't want to be all super duper redundant with it. So we might start getting to some of the funkier stuff. I guess I'll talk about smoothing the layers a little bit and then some variation in the thickness. Temporarily, let's jump this back to geometry and no geometry. We'll just back to the spline, or I can even say flat in this case. And playing around, we can add more slices back in again. And I want to talk a little bit about under spread. We've got some special settings. We got things like variation. Excuse me. Actually, I want to redo that little section there. Under spread, there's a under spread, there's some secret settings, and one of them is variation. I can grab that and start changing how much space is in between each layer, and we get all this random distance between the different layers, which can be pretty cool. That's still traveling around as the character passes through. Let's go and set the rate down to 0. In addition to that variation, you can also do this spread, which is currently the current, actually that's, sorry, I'm messing things up. Dropping the variation back down again, there's a different setting called spacing, and that is currently everything is spaced out exactly as it is at 100%, but I can start squishing them down until the entire thing gets flattened and every layer is in the exact same spot. That would look maybe a little bit better as splines. We can see all of those are squished together, but you also have the option of pushing those apart. We can say, give it extra spacing in between and really stretch things out. Each of these giving you different, just kind of cool, crazy MoGraph options. Let's twirl that back down again. Does matrix mode Another thing that this tool does that you might not know about is you can actually return this not just as a single orientation, but we can return this as a matrix. We have this handy button called Create Matrix, and you'll see this will do its best job to create a new matrix object. I'll shrink down this draw size, and you'll see that the matrix has all these individual dots that are being made up, and that gets fed through to Slicer, and it'll create slices wherever those matrix object clones are. So we have the ability of grabbing the slicer and saying, well, I would like to randomize those. So grabbing a random effector here, and we'll let those spread out. And as soon as it refreshes, you can see there's going to be a slice everywhere one of those matrix objects is. Now, you'll see that for the most part, if they move left or right, that doesn't matter. It's only how far up and down they are. But another cool aspect of this is instead of changing the position, I will say, give me a random color. So just give me the random field color. I will say change the color to be the effector color, and you see those will get randomized. And if we go back and tell the geometry to be a spline, you'll see, I forgot I have to explode it. Go back and be a spline. If we go to the spline tab, I could say explode out all these different spline layers, and we'll do segments and say, yes, explode per layer. Now if I deselect, why is that not showing the colors? Unless that's a setting. Oh, there is a setting. I'm going to do that. Go to segments and we'll say explode the layers, and that will unlock the colorize setting. And under there, we can say colorize them, and we can say randomly from input grayscale, but I'm going to say from matrix. And now if I deselect them, you see that they've taken on the colors of the matrix. And even more fun, if you wanted, you could render that from redshift. So I'll say render tags, redshift object, and the curve is going to render as, let's say, hair strands. We'll make those thicker. And let's right click and not right click. Select the slicer and make sure you drag your ref. Goodness gracious. Select slicer and make sure you link your redshift tag here so that actually gets propagated to each of the children. So now if I were to jump to my redshift renderer and hit render, will those propagate, or do I need to make a material? I'm not sure. Well, that is hiccuping real bad. Oh, okay. Well, it did work, but man, it hiccuped real bad. I'll just pop that open again. I can now go to my redshift render view, and I guess gotta clear that out. Dang it. How do you clear view? Clear frame buffer. I can now jump to my redshift render view, give that an activate, and now the redshift tag will automatically render, and it also automatically renders with the color of the individual splines. And right now we're just randomly coloring them with a random effector, but you could be colorizing that with any of the effectors or the fields. So there are those slices. So just another way of generating, I was going to say geometry, but that's not geometry. So just another way of making this so that you can, oh, that's terrible wording. So just another way of rendering out the slicer. Give that a close. And now let's move on to some maybe even crazier rigs. And I think this stuff gets really fun. I think a lot of people think of the slicer as kind of an ends to itself. It's just, here's the slicer, it gets the end result to you. And it works really cool in a bunch of ways, like doing things like landscapes and whatnot. But thinking of the slicer as a single slice can actually open up some cool opportunities. And let me show you what I mean. If we make a new slicer from scratch, let's link to the object again. And this time it'll be that same mesher. And this time I'm going to say, give me a single slice, just one cut. And that's sort of here at 0. If I wanted to, I could also grab the spread and bring it all the way down. Doesn't make a difference, but it just eats up less viewport. And also I believe if I double click, nope, I thought double clicking hid that, but that must be mesh the spline. And also, if you don't want to see that widget, you can turn off preview cuts, and now it'll get rid of it. But now we have a single cut, and that single cut can be anything we like. It could be geometry, it could be the extrude, but now we could do something like scan through the character. We could pull this through and just get like this one little body scan going, bzzz, like pulling out the entire thing. But here's where it gets really cool, is we can feed the slicer into a cloner. Let me grab a cloner, throw that inside, and I will say I want not a grid, but linear. And the linear with 0 space. And actually we could do multiple ones here. Let me start giving it a little bit of space, and look at that. I have 3 clones and I'm offsetting by 1, and look at that. We get 3 cuts. So what's happening here? Well, the slicer is smart enough that it can be doing slices from within the cloner. That means we can clone new slicers wherever we want to, so they can be placed via the cloner. But what this means is we can actually give it variation in their rotation. So let's create some extra copies here. Actually, we'll do the entire stack for the entire character. And keep in mind, these are being cloned. This is now 55 different slicers being made. So we've got a whole bunch of different slicers. Instead of one slicer making, in this case, 68 cuts, it's 68 different slicers. But if each one's slicing individually, that now means that we can do things like feed in a random effector. And this time, instead of doing position, why don't we do some rotation? So I will start spinning these on every axis. And as I do, we can actually get it to slice off axis, off the plane that we are on. So these are now going every which way. And it's a really fun way of doing things like wrapping up this character. It's almost as if there's like a bit of string wrapped in one spot. Or actually think of it like rubber bands, like a rubber band stretched from one spot to another, going all over the character. Whew. If we zoom on in, you'll see that I'm still able to hit play and have the entire character be animated. They're going to go and jump through the air, and they're passing through this cloud of all these different slicers. Now, keep in mind, there are now 68 different slicers going on, but you can see that we are getting the end result, all of those splines. And again, think of it as raw material. Back into our slicer, we are returning it currently as a bunch of splines, but we could say, hey, give these as flat discs. And look at the way we're filling out the overall shape of the character now by all of these different random cuts. It's almost like these random sheets of cardboard that are cutting through the character and being interconnected in it would be very difficult ways, but really filling out the shape. And it's pretty unique, and that would be impossible to do without slicer here. We can give that some thickness, grab the extrude and just give it a set extrusion. Maybe even push that idea of those slices of cardboard a little bit, giving those thickness from where they are. And this is going to look a little bit weird, but you can push the thickness really far and look at these crazy shapes, because the slicer is just a single cross section and you're just extruding it however far you want to. Yeah, so that's a random one. You can do random positions. I'm trying to think of anything else I want to show, because this could wrap up relatively quickly. It's not the smoothest one. I'm not in love with it, but I do want to be getting the tutorials out regularly. Is there any questions about the slicer? I see that we already had one shout from Squishy about getting potentially making a different tutorial about making the stuff ready for laser cutting, but let me think. What else do I've got one more thing I want to do with the radial, which might take a try or two. And then if we go back and look at the reference, yeah, the radial one I think is pretty much the last one. I mean, you can slice a slicer. I don't know that that helps. We could round things out. I mean, there's so many more details I could throw out there. But, I don't want to just make it like a here's how to use slicer video. I'm trying to make this be like, hey, let's make that look. Let's make this look. Let's make this look. Yeah, so let's just go to the radial one. I'll give that a save because I might have to come back to this point. And really, there's just one last look I'd like to tackle here. So let's put this back to regular splines. And with our cloner, instead of doing a linear stack of slices, I would like to do a radial one. And for this, why don't we change our cloner mode to be a radial? And the radius is going to be really tiny. Let's make that down to 0. And let's make sure that we're actually near where the character is. This is very important. Let's make sure that we're actually kind of circling around them. And then we need to orient our slicer to be the correct direction. So let's change this from being Y plus to, I'm not sure, let's try Z plus. And yeah, Z plus seems to be working. And you can now see that we are pivoting from wherever I move my slicer. it is creating a radial cut of all of them. So a very, very different look, but it's kind of a fun way of getting contours of a shape. And if I grab that radial and start increasing the count, make sure you want to do odd numbers, because if you do even numbers, then the opposite ones sort of meet each other. But as I increase the count, we can get more and more slices along the entire form, and that can get returned however we want as well. So let's grab our volume mesher, hide that away, and now we've got all these splines. Very unique look for that. And the whole thing could spiral. We could add more random effects onto it, but we can also grab the slicer and again return some sort of geometry. Let's grab those flat sheets and like, look at this. It's almost like it's made out of thin sheets of paper all spiraling around. It's actually kind of creating a freaky optical illusion. So you can grab that center point, move it wherever you like. But of course, just as we've had for every step along the way, this is still able to be animated. I hit play and the entire character can be moving through this cloud that is a spiral of slicers, again, resulting in some pretty cool, wacky effects. That's fine. I'm curious if moving this and spinning it will give any kind of a cool visual. I guess that's worth saying. Selecting that cloner, let's scoot that up into the air, hit R for rotate, and you can see I can spin this to any orientation I like. It can be spiraling from the front here. Oh, that one's freaky. Look at that. And move it to some diagonal. So yeah, all of these completely different look. Put that pretty much towards the front. Let's make a bunch more slices. So grabbing the cloner, let's add more and more and more and more. Again, just make sure it's an odd number. And look at all of those crazy slices. Man, that'd be trippy. But rendering that out as but rendering this out as, say, sheets of paper or cardboard, any sort of material. Oh, I hated that part. I'm imagining rendering these out as if they're sheets of paper. So lots of really cool opportunities there. Let's move back to the reference from the slicer kind of introduction video I made. And you can see that we have covered, I think, every single look that we had here. These are different randomized slices, but just a little bit randomized. Then over here, we have characters like that one that have total random rotation. Then we've got the little swept lines like we made early on, maybe just little circle splines going around. This one from front to back, this one from side to side. We got some mummy wrapped looking ones here going from the bottom up to the top. This one's just rounded out a little bit, probably putting a little bevel on the extrude right there. That's the spiral one we were just talking about. So all these cool ways of slicing up even just this one little figure, let alone the ways that we could go through and drive the different colors of the objects, turn them into different materials, stack up all the different things. There's so many different examples, even just through this animation, doing things like, well, all these models I made using techniques very similar. And if I let that play, one of my favorite shots is this cheese, where I have all these slices of cheese falling through, and I just sliced up a little bit of text and then ran simulations on it and let them fall. This was just one simple model, sliced it up a bunch, and it was able to make all these different colors of cheese and pass it through. So again, if ever you are interested in any sort of specific tutorial, please let me know in the comments, and I can try and tackle it in the future. Okay, I'm going to be wrapping this up. If nobody has any specific questions or follow-ups on it, then I will just do the wrap-up. But I think we're probably good on that. As far as just like the quick looks that you can get here, I think this covers a lot of them. There are things that we didn't cover, like if I were to put this back to being just, well, that's not the best way of doing it. But like you can clean up the geometry a bunch. Like I've got these smoothing layers, which actually will clean up the geometry a little bit. We can expand and kind of like make all those layers push out. There's always a possibility that they start crisscrossing each other, so I tend not to use that setting. It's very specific, even though you can see some layers disappear, but you can kind of inflate and deflate. But honestly, I wouldn't even do it that way. I would always go back to the volume builder and inflate stuff this way, which would be, you know, it could be funny where you can like inflate the stuff to be like these giant blobs or pull them in further, make it all crazy skinny. So yeah, there's some extra fun details, but I don't think that those are necessary for the tutorial. Dean asking best way to move any of those splines into Illustrator. I don't think I'll make that part of the video, but I will answer that for you. I think I'm just going to go to the outro unless anybody has a specific question. But if well, I mean, these are 3D splines. I tend to export on like a 2D point of view, but if you have splines, is it splines or do I do it as geometry? But yeah, I think it's splines. It's splines, and I think I usually export as DXF. You can do a file export, and if you have splines and you say DXF, Illustrator is able to open those. So give that a try. If I was to do it in the tutorial, I have to do a couple practices and see if I knew what I was talking about. There are ways of using Sketch and Tune to translate stuff into it. And you also do polygon edges, which is a potentially a viable way of doing it. But that's definitely like a 2-dimensional thing, not the 3-dimensional one. Okay, I'm going to assume that there's no other additional questions. So I will just record the outro. So, So that's going to wrap up another little tutorial. This time we are focusing on the Rocket Lasso slicer. If anybody ever has any questions about any of our plugins, feel free to ask. But also, if you just have general questions, you can jump on over into my Rocket Lasso live stream, where I tackle Cinema 4D questions live from the audience for 2 hours every week. And we just try and figure out cool things from different inspirations, from different artists that we've seen, just raw questions that are coming from somebody's head for things that they don't know how to create. So that's a fun way of engaging with these things as well. And if you have ideas for tutorials that are completely unrelated to any of the stuff we're talking about here, like I'm always open to different ideas. As I mentioned, if you support on Patreon, you get access to all the scene files here. I always say that my favorite way of learning is reverse engineering things. So if that's the way you like to learn, then grabbing the scene file and playing with it, going backwards, being like, oh, how were these different parts made? That could be the way to do it for you. But I think that's going to wrap this one up. Thank you so much for watching another Rocket Lasso tutorial. If you liked it, please go ahead and give it a like, and a comment is always helpful. But otherwise, I will see you next tutorial or live stream. Bye-bye, everybody. Usually I have more trouble with the outro. Oh yeah, ArtSmart does stuff as well. I haven't done too much of it. Dim or Sulk, it doesn't require hair renderer to export to Illustrator. Like I said, the DXF I think does work. I've done those types of exports to do my laser cutting. But there are methods using hair renderer and using Sketch and Tune, and so I think there is a series of ways to do it. So it just depends on what you want to do. But yeah, we're actually wrapping this one up in a somewhat reasonable time frame because it wasn't a crazy long tutorial. So I'll take it. Yeah, we should probably think of something that looks a little more pretty next time. This one wasn't very flashy. It was a little bit more, I don't want to say technical, but it's more like, hey, here's gray renders, which I should try and avoid. But I didn't have a lot of time to prep this one. It's been a very busy week, and I think it's going to be a very busy month, honestly. So we'll have to tackle those things as we go. But anyway, happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Thanks for coming and hanging out. As always, I will be back next week. Maybe not the week after, because it might be full on NAB prep and practice by that point. But I hope to keep on doing these tutorials. Please, if you can, do your best to check out the tutorials, give them thumbs ups, and share them around if you can. I really appreciate it. It takes, it's a decent amount of effort to put that stuff together, and I'm doing that type of stuff pretty much for free. So any love that they can get is always helpful. But I super appreciate everybody being here and hanging out with me during these live streams. It's really fun. And we get to tackle all sorts of cool, crazy stuff inside of C4D. It would be fun to explore that Pyro stuff more too. See if we can get a full concept going for nice looking like rocket plumes. I do like doing those special effects type tutorials. Honestly, those tend to do pretty well. And at some point it'd be nice to go back and revisit some sort of like breaking apart destruction stuff. C4D is not like the most powerful engine for that. Obviously Houdini's like the king when it comes to most of that type of stuff, but like exploring some of the new simulations and whatnot, and even doing some particle. It might be kind of fun to think about some particle tutorials as we go. I have that really cool concept I did in one of the live streams, not live streams, in one of the What's New videos of like using the branch spline modifier to grow a tree and having particles travel down every branch of the tree. And it worked like really well. Breaking that out and re-recording it as a proper tutorial could be a fun way to go as well. So, hey, in a couple of weeks, if I'm like, I can't think of a tutorial, then, remind me of any of those ideas. Can you have two slicers inside a cloner? Can they blend? I mean, yes, but why would you want to blend them? I'll pull it up, but and honestly, there's not even like a scene file to save here. I was gonna say save the scene file. I guess I could go through and make I could go through and save each of those rigs out sort of simultaneously. That'd probably be a good idea. So yeah, I probably will have to go and do that. But um, blending two slicers. So let me see if I know what you mean. So we are making a single slice, and to keep it simple, we'll just set this back to linear. And right now, I think I didn't rotate that. I changed the slicer orientation, so we'll set that back to Y. Okay, so now we're making a bunch of cuts going vertical, and for some strange reason, oh, that's weird. It was like the cloner is making a phantom one. So I've got all these slicers, and we've got the. So let me think of why you'd want to blend between them. Like I could say 0 spacing, so now they're all being created at the same spot. If I put that into a group and I duplicate the group, and now I say, hey, can you blend between these? I could grab the second one, physically move it up, and now you see it is blending between the first one and the second one. But just goes through, there's not a lot of parameters to blend between here. I could, in theory, grab both slicers and put them into something like extruded mode. So now they're all extruding. And one of them I can say, well, you're extruding 0, and the other one is extruding 10. And now you'll see that as these go up, that each extrusion is less extruded than the one before. And we can make a lesser count here. So yeah, so you can see like thicker, and they get thinner and thinner and thinner as they go. But the individual slices are not something you can really blend between. If I made one slice and I made a different slice, in theory, if you had the same point count, you could blend between them, not via a slicer directly. And then I probably do something like, let me kind of super stretch my imagination to think of why you might do something like this. Could you make, I'll pull these out. We'll make them splines. I'll scoot that down. So we're getting a slice. Well, so here's where it gets tricky, is because see that there's 3 splines here. It's cutting through each arm and the torso. And if I move this up, there's going to be 2 splines. You can't blend between those two. There is no way to blend between those two. Like there's no logical way that those could blend. Now, if you just had 2 objects with the same number of segments, at least like that and that, like in theory, you could blend. But C4D doesn't like blending between anything unless they have the same point count, and even the same point count, you want the same point count to be in the same kind of area. Now, we could force these to be the same point count by feeding them into like Rocket Lasso's utility splines, and you could say, I want you to be exactly this count. And then you could use like I think you could use a pose morph to morph between the two. But I'm trying to think of, it would help if you said how you want to blend between these, because even now, it gets tricky, but it's like right now, I said we could kind of do that scanning effect where I could grab this and kind of scan up through the character, which is kind of cool. It's fun to be able to do that kind of thing. And even now I'm not demonstrating it in any sort of visual fancy way, but you think about these things as raw material, and where you can imagine all sorts of like scanning beams or something here. Let me search for the word branch. And I can drop this on here and tell those to all aim in the same direction on Y+, get rid of that, get rid of all this extra little wiggle, and now we just have these straight lines pushing upward. We could do it by a count, but it'd probably be better in this case to do based on length, and give them, they might pop around, so I'm intentionally going to give it some length variation, just so I can see if that is the case. But you can imagine if we set this up in, why don't we just do it? This is outside the scope of what the tutorial was, so I don't mind it being separate. So we could say hair strands, we could shrink those down, and let's see if Redshift shows them. So we'd go and make those be sort of like a glowy, man, Redshift is really taking a while to initialize. There's nothing crazy in the scene. I'm curious why it's taking so long. But yeah, you see you got these little lines. Now imagine those were emissive and glowy and transparent. So like obviously they're not, but right now I could grab this and I can start passing up through the character, and you can see how those little lines are kind of stretching to meet and going around. So it's kind of a cool effect that we can go and pass through there. And then because all of our plugins have this really cool feature, which I wish existed in a lot more Maxon stuff, that we can link to the child, but we can also link remotely. And because we link remotely, that means I can grab the volume builder, and without moving the spline, I can actually pass the character through the spline. So now they're still static, let's say, on the ground, and the character is passing through the line instead, which gives you kind of those coherent lines. And so this is almost like that one line is morphing. This is morphing through all the different states of the character as we pass through it. So yeah, there's always lots of cool opportunities and ways of layering this stuff up. And even layering up the, I mean, typically you do this type of stuff with like topography, but even if we were to grab just this branch and make several, not branch, this slicer, and make several cuts, and let's go and give it a little bit of spread again. Yeah, this is a total spread. So yeah, a couple cuts, and then inside, get that spacing and squish it back down again. Now it's grabbing several different cuts for the character and passing through all of them. So now grabbing the character and passing it through, you see we kind of get this cool layered up multi-step thing. So, you know, it's all just raw material. Bing. And because I set those branches to step, that actually works pretty well. I wonder if this would look good if the branches were set to relative. So it's relative, and we'll say a little bit shorter. But now you see the tiny little segments have little smaller lines. So now as this passes through, like, yeah, those lines are always going to pop from that center point. There's no, as far as I can think, there's no way of getting around that. I mean, if we set it to an absolute count, but then you have the problem of varying counts. But yeah, if I said count, give it enough of a count that looks pretty good, then those might be more visually coherent. Yeah. They do still pop around depending on the situation, which makes sense because suddenly a shape is jumping from one spline to two splines to three splines. So everything's just kind of jumping to there. So but you see, whenever it's not popping, you see those are way more coherent. But if it's really tiny, the lines are really close. And when it gets really like fat and big, then the lines are really far apart from each other. So it's kind of like, yeah, pick your poison for which is giving a better effect. That should be it. And yeah, everything went well. I think the recording worked. So yeah, I'm going to wrap that one up. Tonight is a CMAG meeting, a Chicago Motion Artist Group meeting. I think it's at a mini golf course. So that should be fun. I've never been there before. So that'll be cool. And I'll see everybody here next week for another live stream. And if not then, maybe you'll be at NAB. And if you are at NAB, come and say hi at the Maxon booth, at the pinball party, at the MoGraph meetup. There's going to be a bunch of different places, and I'll be at all of the cool MoGraph stuff. So that'll be that. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out, as always. And I will say goodbye.